Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, not as always, but someone I'm always happy to have on. It's Paul. What's going on, buddy?
What's happening, nerds? Good to be
Uh,
here back once again. I have officially lost count of the number of times I have been here now.
you are one of our most frequent guests, absolutely. And it's good to have you back on again. Tom is unavailable this week. It's Tyler's week off. But Paul, from Radio Free Hammer Hall, I will link his channel down below. He heroically stepped up and said he would co-host with me. So thank you, Paul, for us to do this. As soon as I had the concept, I reached out to Paul and I was like, and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna love this." And I was like, "Yeah, I know you would. This is such a Paul topic, right?" So I
Yeah,
knew you had to be the stand-in guest here as long as you had the time to do it. So
I realized actually, I think I basically suggested this topic a few weeks ago, like in the Discord. I was like, hold on, let me flip over real quick in there. I see that. I said, what did I say? Have you ever done a General's Handbook retrospective show? That would be a good show to do when the news is slow. I think that's basically what we're doing today, right?
to some degree, you're not wrong. Like, yeah, it's you're not wrong. It's pretty close, pretty close. All right. So yes, tonight we are going to take a look back at all the editions of AOS. We're going to talk about the best and the worst elements of each of them. And Paul, I don't know about you, but when I was doing this, there were things I was just like, "Oh yeah, that's right, that happened." Right? It just
Yeah.
revelatory is the best way I could describe it. Because it is amazing
Yeah.
how much of our brain has just like smoothed over the past 8 years or 9 years.
Yeah. There's some, even just things that have just been normalized in third edition Age of Sigmar that like are completely different than whatever it was, like just all the way up to the end of second edition.
Right.
That like we just forgot that was normal for 6 years.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, at any rate, that's what we're going to talk about. But of course, first the news. There we go. All right. So, first off, we got a little rumor engine. Badoop. There it is. That seems like an AOS thing. So, the rumor engine is a Scully thing with some ties on it and another skull and a little Rooney thing. So, that's what that is.
Yeah.
Paul, do you have any guesses for what this particular tiny thing is? What are we looking at here, Paul? If you had to guess.
Uh, Somebody, I believe it was Martin Orlando, pointed out in a chat that that particular rune is the same or really similar to one of the runes that's engraved into the leg of one of the Ogroid Theridons.
Yeah, yeah, correct.
Um, so probably a chaos thing.
Okay, okay.
Um, it looks like an altar of some. Okay, so it's maybe some kind of altar, which makes me think maybe it's a new Chaos War Shrine.
Wow, that's a big swing. I don't like. God knows we need it. Okay,
Yeah,
that Chaos War Shrine model has seen it's aged. Let me just say it that way. My Chaos War Shrines are all just like custom kit bashes because I didn't want to use any of the real models. Um,
yeah. Mine is just a completely covered in like green stuff with tentacles and nurgly things all over the place.
sure,
So
sure. I think that he was right to point out the Ogroid connection, but I think it's Beasts of Chaos. I don't think this is something we're going to see that's like FEC or anything soon. So let me give you my particular guess, and who knows. Uh, in 40K, there's a model for the Gene Stealer Colts. It's like a guy in front of like a little hollow screen thing, like directing a battle or something. You know what I mean? It's like a little
yeah,
command console game thing in front of him.
yeah.
Anyways, I think you're right on the altar. I think this is a Beast of Chaos thing that's going to be like attached to a model, right? Like part of the model. Like he's going to have it with him. So, because this is pretty small, you can tell from just like the nature of the paint here. It's pretty small. So that's my personal feeling. Like we're zoomed way in on this. I feel like this is a little small piece of that dude with an altar. That's my guess. And look, I think we all know that yes, that Cygnus said yes, he's directing an assault on Warhammer World. That is correct. That the guy in 40K, that is what's happening. Like the map picture is the actual Warhammer World corporate headquarters. At any rate, so that's my particular thoughts. But hey, who knows? As always with these things. Okay. What's up next? Well, oh, go ahead.
What I will add though about a point for you on probably being right about Beasts of Chaos is that's one of the armies that just hasn't really gotten new releases or things updated or replaced in Age of Sigmar yet. So it would definitely make sense that they would get something coming up soon. Like they've gotten new stuff. They've got, all of like the Zangor and like that one the one Slaneshi gore. But
Sure.
other than that, like you could use all of the like land gore that we have in the army. So
Yeah,
certainly
I
on the
mean,
list.
sure. What I look, I wish that the relative age of a model range and the amount that it's been touched had some kind of correlation to its likelihood to be touched or to get new models again. But those are clearly two unrelated items. Armies that have
I mean, I
needed
think
it
we're
for a long time have had very little touch. So, I think it's whatever captures the fancy of either upper management or the sculptors is basically what gets touched.
yeah, and I think we're just going to keep that Skaven Plague Priest around forever at this point, just for the funnies of it and just to annoy you.
I mean, look, it's amazing that it still exists and is a thing. That's to have it be 30 years old, older than so many players playing Age of Sigmar is truly incredible. Like that's really an accomplishment, right? So there you
And
go.
really, like, it's actually like considering it's 30 years old, it's a good sculpt. Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
It's fine. It's fine.
It for its age. For its age. I'm not
I
saying it hasn't aged like a fine wine,
sure.
but it could be way worse. Like compared to other things sculpted in that time range, could be
Sure.
worse.
I I absolutely agree. And of course I see all your comments, dear, of course. I figured Paul can handle himself as you're making fun of him. We're making fun of Tom, I suppose. Really, we're not really making fun of Paul. It's really just we know Tom won't watch back, so we're just gonna make fun of him, unless he happens to be watching on his drive home. In which case, we're making fun of you, Tom. Take that. Anyways, all right, let's keep going. So AOS or non-update here. Sorry, old world update. That's what I meant to say. We got another old world update. We're going through the phases, Paul. And
Yeah.
what we got is a movement phase update. Here we see the close order and open order. Those can be in like fighting formation or marching formation. It has to do with are they wider than are they long, or longer than they are
Yep.
wide. And then skirmish and obviously lance and all of that. And so I read the article, and I immediately had more, as per usual with these things. I had more questions than I had answers. But what I don't did you read this article at all? Did you think about this at all? What
Um,
did you think of this?
I didn't actually read the article, but I have listened to a few videos on it.
Okay, fair enough.
Um, I, I just listen to videos in the background while I work during the day. I don't like tend to sit down and actually like read the articles that much.
Totally fair.
But um, it it seems cool. It seems interesting. It's a little bit of a different take on you know, it, they're taking very similar things to what they've done in the past and
Sure.
tweaking them a little bit. And, I as you said, there's definitely questions. The first thing that popped into my head was, okay, like if you move faster when you're in a marching column and you get combat bonuses when you're wider than you are deep, what happens if your unit is 5x5?
And in the pipe, 5x5. That was the first thing I thought of too, right? It was like, what about equal? That seems possible. So
Yep.
the other thing that then immediately occurred to me was, what about armies that traditionally had very deep ranks? And we're now obviously, we don't have Skaven at this point in their launch armies. They've said they'll have like some kind of weird supporting PDFs for that stuff or whatever, but obviously it won't be official and it'll quickly be outdated. And if you're not playing one of the launch armies, you should probably forget about that. Those things don't hold up. Those things do age like old cheese left on the sidewalk on a sunny day. As the AoS we'll talk about in a moment, as the AoS launch PDFs did.
Yeah.
But like Skaven were a classic example of this, right? You'd be like 5 wide and 10 deep, because you'd have a block of 50. So does that mean you go like ultra wide formation now, like you're 10x5 or something like that? Like that's your fighting formation for those? Maybe you just got to be real super crazy high frontage. The things that I really want the answer to aren't much of this stuff. It's like, are you going to go back? Because in my mind, the best time for sort of the points and cost and formations of armies in Warhammer history was actually in sort of the 4th, 5th edition era. So the late 90s, mid to late 90s. Because an army was very small, Paul. Very small. Okay? This is hard for you. Like, let me see if I can make this real for you. Okay? A daemonette. Yeah? Like, you know what I'm referencing. A daemonette. A single one. That girl. Who we now buy in units of 30. Right? A daemonette was 36 points apiece. A model.
Quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. A Chaos Knight in Chaos armor was more than we pay for one guy, just like a dude. Was more than we pay for a Chaos Lord. Okay? What this meant, now obviously these units were vastly different in performance. There was actually like huge performance gaps between the various models. But regardless of all that, one of the things that was fun about it was your armies weren't that big. Like a full-size unit was like 5x3 guys or 4x3 guys or something. That's a unit. And I really liked that. I liked that like that was the appropriate amount to collect, right? Armies felt attainable, I think, in a real way that helped people get there. And then I do have Cygnus said 6th edition with Ravening Hordes was Warhammer Fantasy Battle Perfection. I did love Ravening Hordes as well. I think it was a wonderful time. Wildly unbalanced, but super fun. I played the heck out of Ravening Hordes. But armies got way bigger. Just like that trend just kept going and has not abated to this day, right? Like if you asked me to wave a magic wand and fix AoS, I would make instead of, and we'll talk about it, instead of sinking the average to, like 5 Liberators at 100 points, it'd be like 5 Liberators for 200 points. I would just knock everything way up and shrink armies just dramatically down. That'd be the easiest way, because that'd speed up game time too, by the by.
For sure.
All right. Anyways, seemed interesting enough. So cool beans. My last thought on Old World is, boy, are they not afraid of complexity, huh?
Oh no. It feels like they are saying, this is what you guys wanted. Enjoy.
Yep. You wanted the complexity, you'll get the complexity. Like, each phase, 4 sub-phases, different things happening, different rules, interactions. Like, just in their summary articles, I'm like, oh, there's a lot going on. And if that's in a marketing summary article, woof. I can't wait for the actual rules when you start laying army stuff on top of it. That'll be great. Okay, so it's going to be a good time. If you like a complex game, this is going to be good for you. I mean, and there's a group of people who like, I'm not judging. Like, there's people who like that.
Yeah, I think they kind of realized that there is a subset of people out there that want that,
Sure.
and they're trying to sell stuff to them
Yeah.
and
Sell
make
to
a
the
game
niche
for them.
market.
So
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
go for it.
And yes, that is a very real possibility, Icy Blankets, that this could end up being way more complex than actual fantasy was. I don't disagree. And like 8th edition was a pretty darn complicated game. All right, next up, we have this the Keymaster. Hey Paul, are you the gatekeeper? Because this guy's the Keymaster. Here we go. We had relevant Ghostbusters joke has been made. This is our new FEC boy that was previewed. This guy looks freaking awesome. Awesome.
Gorgeous, love it. Pose like that model is going to be all over painting competitions. Like the pose is incredible, the details incredible, and like it's also not like overwhelming detail.
Yep.
Like I feel like it's giving people enough detail to work with, but not overwhelming you. It's giving like you a lot of room for artistic expression in there.
Yep. I agree completely. I love everything about this dude. His wings look great. I love the little like they look like bone clawed hands. I understand. I know how wings and phalanges and stuff work, but like I'm just saying they did a really good job of sort of capturing that feeling of almost them like grasping down on something, right? With those big long
Yeah.
spines at the end. His like super extended fingers and nails. He has just enough stuff that you could believe and understand the delusion, right? My problem with FEC was always they told this amazing story, but you're just a bunch of naked people walking around, right? Like that is real crazy. Like you're like there's a certain limit, right? And I think it's at the line of like physical objects existing. But this dude actually
Yeah.
has stuff. Like I can picture him thinking his pieces and accoutrement he's carrying are like royal regalia, when in fact they're just leathers and scraps and bones. I'm like, yeah, okay, but he's got a thing, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's cool.
I think part of like the disconnect with FEC, I think, was that they had this great concept, this great lore and story and all of that, but it was for like a kind of an old, crappy model range that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really reflecting it very well. And if they update the model range, or at least infuse more models into it like this, um, it's going to be awesome.
I agree.
At least,
And no, I don't think at all, Silent Sorrow, that this means there's no Summer King. I think 1,000% we still see the Summer King. Like every Dawnbringers book is just like, then they were looking for the Summer King and they're tracking down the Summer King and who's the Summer King? And it's just like, I mean, they cannot drop more references in every single Dawnbringers book uh to this one character, to Usharan or whatever. So no, I think 100% we're getting that, dude. I just think you're gonna have lots of new stuff with the FEC. We already saw the other sprue too, so we know we're getting a multi-kit release here. So cool.
yeah, this was just like so casually dropped, like, oh, here is this gorgeous model. Moving on, like they just didn't make a big deal about this at all.
Yep.
Um,
Agreed.
it just screams that there's a lot more when
Yep.
they do something like that.
Absolutely. When they're dropping heaters like this just on a random Monday or Tuesday or whatever, right? That tells you everything you need to know about what's coming. You're exactly right. Like if this is their cast off, right?
Yeah,
Like we're not saving this for a big show. We're just gonna put this out as a rando article on a Monday. Then yeah, I like man, this gets me stoked for Usharon himself. I think he's just gonna be just fire. So yeah, absolutely.
yeah. I mean, they just randomly drop like if this was going to be like the only model coming out with this release,
Sure.
like they wouldn't have just dropped it this casually.
No.
And there is no way that they would have dropped a model so casually that just screams "Paint me for Golden Demon"
Yeah. Yeah.
like this. If there wasn't like a whole bunch more behind it too, that they were even more happy about.
Yep. Absolutely. Totally agreed. There you go. Okay. Let's see. Elohir Guitar said reaction to the GW new website. We talked about it some last week. It's trash. That is real. It's real easy reaction. It is trash, and whoever they paid for that did a bad job. Or if it was internal people, I'm sorry. That was not good. It is not good. It is a pain to use. I do not like it at all. It looks bad, and they should feel bad. There you go. That's my reaction.
Yeah, they just need to go on to like go watch some YouTube channels for a while, find like an offer code for one of those website services, and just
Skillshare.
get like,
If you build your
yeah,
page with
like,
Skillshare, you can get 10% off.
yeah, yeah, and just have like an intern do it, and it'll come out better than this website is.
Yeah. Woof. Woof. All right. Well, yeah. So that's my feeling on that. There you go. Okay. Uh, yeah. Cygnus says I do like being able to order Forge World and normal GW stuff together, but this doesn't feel worth it. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. All right. Next up. Yeah, but at what cost? Yes, exactly. Next week, not this coming Friday, but next Friday, Friday the 17th of November, we have our next big preview show. And Paul, look at this, buddy. It's everything. 40K, Sigmar, Heresy, Old World, Underworlds, Kill Team, Necromunda, Warcry. Oh, wait. No. Okay, I guess it's not everything. Boo! Why no Warcry? What's going on here? What's with this complete lack of Warcry announcements? But that's a shame. But otherwise, it's basically everything.
Yeah. It actually gives me a good thought because that's going to be dropping just like the Friday night before Du Bois GT, and last year I think we got like a TV or something because they did like the same thing then. Yeah, you like a little
Nice.
preview party or something.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. There was one year where they did this, and I happened to be like in Australia at the time. I think it was like when Lumineth got spoiled. And so, like, I was doing a painting class, and we all just stopped the painting class and brought it up on the TV to watch it or something like that during lunch. So, yeah. Like, we had arranged to have the lunch break be at the time of the preview. So, but it was funny because it was, like, Saturday, and I was like, oh, it's in the past. At any rate, look forward very much to seeing what we got for, AOS and the Old World and for Underworlds. Those are the things I'm obviously most interested in. But we'll, if there's a good enough thing happening, I'll see if I can rustle up some folks to do a reaction show. It's at 10 p.m. Eastern next Friday, so that's not a bad time at all. That would mean we'd be doing it at, I don't know, 11 o'clock or something. So fully doable. I expect what we'll see for AOS is like FEC. Basically, we'll see everything. I assume they're just going to spoil that because I can't imagine FEC. It's November. We can't be that far away from the FEC release, right? So I assume we're going to see that and Dawnbringer's full. Yeah. So. Okay. Cool. Which are probably tightly tied together. So there we go.
Yeah, I have a feeling they probably have to go together. That's probably why FEC is being delayed.
Probably. My guess is that I think, Paul, again, you're dead on. I think they're very, just given where the story's at, I think they're very tightly tied together, and hence, one book got off schedule, and then the other one had to be delayed or whatever, right? Because otherwise, why wouldn't they have just put out the FEC stuff already? It wouldn't make sense. Last bit of news, this coming Friday, the 10th, watch this space, this channel, as well as Tabletop Minions channel, as we got something launching. We got something happening, as you can see here, from this little image that I've brought up. This Friday, we're going to be dropping something new. It is our new zine, and our zine will be launching some exciting things. So we'll see. So check it out. But follow on Twitter, socials. Up there, you can see it. It's right up there. There it is. It's still the bird. I'm not going to replace it with that stupid X. But you can follow it up there, and as well as the Instagram, and I'll be posting about it on both. But we'll also have it on. There'll also be things on both of our channels. So there you go. 2 days, November 10th. Tune in, and find out what's happening. It's not a preview, it's just the launch of the thing. Okay, with that, why don't we go to some pick of the week? Pick of the week. Paul, what do you want to share with everybody?
Well, I'm gonna pull a Tyler.
I'm ready.
I'm gonna give you two.
Okay.
Two. First of all, I'm just gonna go shameless self-promotion for my own channel. Dropped a little one of my occasional videos at this point. I don't regularly do much of anything at all anymore. I just do stuff when it's, I don't know, fun and inspired. So if you want to find out about how we make steam tanks great again, I did a little video yesterday about making steam tanks great again and how we're going to make Archaon pay for the cog fort and all that good stuff. But yeah, I think steam tanks are actually really cool in the new Cities of Sigmar book. And so I went through a little bit of that and, kind of relating it back to what they did in Warhammer Fantasy Battles and how they are still, I think, going to be serving a similar role as what they used to.
Yep.
I
watched your video. I liked your video. I agree completely. You and I are on the page. You even make mention of it. Like, GW are cowards. Make it a 1-up save. It's a giant tank. It's made of metal. It should be a 1-up save.
Yeah. Yep. It's, if anything.
Yep.
Anyway, and we were talking about Old World before. Ace Hammer has been doing some nice review videos of the articles that have been coming up about Old World, going through the details of it and all of that. Russ always does a really nice job, I think, of going through things. I like his style a lot. Definitely recommend that. So I think he's like, anytime anything's been coming out, he's been pretty quickly after that. He's dropping review videos too for Old World. So if you're into that, interested, I'm not like really super excited about Old World. I'm personally taking it as like an excuse to build Bretonians, and
sure.
I know people locally that are probably going to be playing it, so it's like, well, I might as well have an army. Why not? So
yep. No, that's I was gonna shout that video out as well. I've been watching all Russ's new stuff because for exactly the same reason you said, Paul. It's like, oh, cool. I don't have to read the article. Like, Russ is gonna talk through it and summarize it, give me thoughts. And I like Russ. I think he's a really insightful guy. And so I've been following all his Old World coverage because I'm the same boat as you. This isn't like something I'm super excited for, but I'm interested. Right? And so I'm gonna follow along, and we'll take this journey. And if it's good, I'll say it's good. If it's bad, I'll say it's bad. If it's good but I don't like it, I'll say that too. Right? So we'll figure out where we land. For myself, one of the common questions I get is, hey, I live in a place, and maybe I don't have stores near me or I don't have the chance to go to cons, but I want to participate in a miniature painting competition. Well, imaginary sock puppet person that I just made up, don't worry, there's now an option for you. Because my pick of the week is for Cult of Paint, who is bringing back their MPO, their Miniature Painting Open. It's an online competition. I will link the video down below. Henry and Andy and the whole team over there are all really great guys. And they run a heck of a cool competition. So if you're interested and you've wanted to participate in a painting competition, but you don't have any way to like physically do that near you, which is many people, I think, in the world, this can be a chance to do it as long as you have the internet, which I assume you do if you're watching this. Otherwise, how did you get this? Okay, so that will be linked below. Check it out. Okay. All right. With that, let's turn to some hobby time. Paul, what have you been working on, buddy? What's been on your table?
I actually have had a few different things going on at the moment.
Okay.
I have been working on project that we've been working on for Du Bois is we're working on developing a narrative doubles event.
Okay.
We're piloting it at the event this year. It's just going to basically replace our previous, how most GT like the day before the GT, just do like a 1 day doubles event. Pretty common thing. So we just replaced it with narrative event this year that is going to be similar, kind of to similar to like what Steve Herner does with his events, where it's mainly like cool tables with cool custom rules,
Sure.
a little bit of stuff over it, but nothing really too overbearing. It in like a huge narrative sense. It's mainly just cool narrative tables. So I've been working on actually the Nurgle table for the event. So that's been going on in the background over here. I've also been working on uh, bringing back my Cities of Sigmar army, um, working on rebasing stuff and retooling some things. Um, you know, all the handgunners are now going to be Fusiliers, which are now on a different base size, and some other things are on different base sizes. So I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to do new bases for the whole army. So, you know, working on new bases and their paint jobs on things and converting up uh, things for the new war scrolls.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
uh, various projects in there, and of course, just always have some nerdly stuff on the back burner too. So it's the new cities book went from, oh, you're binning all of my Pantaloon boys to, oh, this is just an interesting opportunity to convert all the things and have fun. And, um,
That's
you
what you
know,
want to see. That's what you want to see.
yeah, yeah, just ended up getting inspired because it turns out I just really like the book a lot. And, um, so yeah, 2024 is going to be the year of pantaloons and cod pieces and feathered hats.
Very nice. Very nice. An aesthetic that I personally have no love or taste for, but again, all aesthetics are personal, and I'm glad that that you like it and agree. Like, there's no reason you can't just do the conversions. You're good. Like, it doesn't. You're never beholden to that. A handgunner is just as easy to be a fusilier in my book. Like, bing bang, there you go, and on and on and on. Right. So, yep.
Yeah. I just for the record, I have to say, I don't really personally love the cod pieces and feathered hats and all of that stuff. It's more that I think it's silly and ridiculous and stupid,
Sure.
and
And
I
so
enjoy it more than that.
that appeals to you. Yeah, yeah, that's fair. That's a totally fair read.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, like I don't think it's awesome. I think it's silly and fun, and that's
Yeah.
about it. I am very tempted uh, to uh, cosplay like Halberdier for an
You can
event.
borrow the costume from Coach. He's got one. So there you go.
Clearly, we need to do me and Coach do like Cities of Sigmar doubles and both wear pantaloons.
There you go. Now you're cooking with gas. Absolutely. For
Hmm.
myself, my weekend was very very busy. This may shock you, but in the lead up to a launch of a new thing from Uncle Adam and I, the last week before launch is very busy, full of a lot of different things. So I spent a lot of my weekend working very hard on things that you will see very soon. Um, Obviously, not anything to do with writing the game, that was done months ago, but everything else to support that launch. But I did get some paint time in, so I'm working still on this Nurgle Sister of Battle girl here. She's a lot of fun. We're making small progress, but we're getting there. And I really dig her. I think she just looks super cool, and she's finding her way. She's finding her way. So still a long way to go, but we're making progress. So, and progress is what
I
matters.
fully endorse. I fully endorse anytime you want to throw yourself at the love of the grandfather. Anytime.
Sure.
It's
Yeah, most
you
Nurgle things
know
don't appeal to me, but something about this figure just really grabbed me. The figure's from Hardcore Miniatures, by the way, if anyone's curious. So they have a bunch of different models for like sort of alternative sculpts for various and sundry Warhammer things, but this one's a 75 millimeter sculpt, and I really dug it. So there you go. All right,
Excellent.
Paul. With that, with our hobby time, sounds like, and then obviously this is the coming weekend, by the way. I am not last minute painting for Holy Havoc. I'll just say that. I'm done. That's been done for a while. With my schedule, I can't afford to be last minute painting. So that's ready to go. But with that, why don't we turn to the topic?
Yeah.
Let's get into it. So Age of Sigmar editions, the best and the worst, the best and the worst elements of each edition of AoS. And really, we're going to separate this. You might think, well, we're on 3.0, so there's 3 editions. But you'd be wrong! You foolish person, you. How could you think such a thing? No, there's been 4 editions so far. Okay? Of course. And the first edition was what we'll call 0. Which was...
Those are the dark times that we try not to talk about.
Yes. Pre any actual thing happening and the game being in a very proto sort of form. Okay. So that's what we're going to talk over. I look for, as we're going through this, chat, I want to hear what you have to say. I want to know your thoughts. I want to know what you think was the best and worst. If you're watching this in the future, drop it down in the comments, okay? I want to know the elements that you found best and worst. And as we go along through this current chat, give me some thoughts. Do you agree with what we're doing? Do you disagree with what we're doing? George, I know, is already calling me out for something he's absolutely right on. And George, you're a lunatic. But anyways, I love you. You're a great guy. Okay, so let's get into a little overview. As I said, Age of Sigmar is on version 3.0, but we're going to say it's had 4 phases. All right? And I think that there's often this discussion of like, this edition was the best, or this edition was the best, or whatever. That's already being discussed, right? Three full editions in. That already comes up all the time. And I always think those are wrong-headed discussions, because I just don't... No edition is without sin, right?
Absolutely.
I think that until you get multiple editions of a game in of this size and this complexity, and then you do a concerted effort to go back and like harvest all of the best stuff and cut all of the bad stuff and use all of your game design experience to like make something that is synergistically greater than the sum of its parts, which I do think, by the way, is what 5th edition D&D ended up doing. I think that's one of the reasons it was so successful, because it looked back over all of its previous work and said, let's take a lot of the best elements of every edition and kind of do that. Maybe they didn't hit yours, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Okay, but that was a goal, regardless of where they landed. All right. And so I think all of these, we just keep moving so much. Paul, one of the things that occurred to me, and I want to get your take on this from a high level. We have, every edition changes so much. It changes so much. The core thing is still there. You're absolutely right. We went back and looked, and we'll talk about this, the 4-page rules. All that's still basically the same. But man, does everything that orbit around that just keep getting bigger or changing in dramatic ways. Like the beating heart remains the same, but man, do we just reorient the solar system around the sun there.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it, I think, is like growth and evolution from there. It's like the original 4-page rules were like this germ in the middle, and it's like it's just all growing out from there constantly. And it doesn't feel like they've pruned many things back yet.
Right.
That's
right.
the thing, myself, looking through all of this. There haven't been things in here where I was like oh, they realized that was a bad idea and they cut it. Like they just keep adding and adding and adding and adding. Some things get modified.
Sure.
But not a lot of things have just gone away. A few things did. Like the realm rules, for example.
Yeah, that's a good pruned example. Now, we switched to like, it became the meta narrative for the whole season instead of a thing that would just jump around all the time, or you could play in all the different realms or whatever, right? it became like, no, we're
Yeah.
just in Gur or whatever, or so on and so forth, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. That's one of the few things that they actually did cut back and change.
Hmm.
Um, but but mainly this has just been this rule snowball.
Yep. Historically, Warhammer goes 3 editions or about 8 to 10 years, and then prunes. Okay, prunes and reorganizes. That's the traditional pattern over the first 3 cycles of Warhammer. So first, second, third, prune and reorganize. Fourth, fifth, 92 to 1,000, 8 year period. Prune and reorganize. Then we had this really long gap of 2000, basically late 2000 to 2015, right? Of sixth, seventh, eighth, because those editions were just really long. And then again, prune and reorganize in a big way. Again, like I'm simplifying, right? But yeah, that's generally how the cycle has gone. And it makes me wonder, like, for 4.0, are we going to get some heavy pruning? Is it time, or are we going to try to get like a perfected thing? Have we learned enough that we're just going to try to make a like platonic version of AOS? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really hoping they don't do is some major revamp that just invalidates all of the existing battle tomes and everything and just says, okay, hard reset. All of your old books don't work with the new rules. Throw it all out, new game.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
know. I'm not as against it, honestly. I don't mind it. I like when they do that and then give us like indices as opposed to trying to limp books over editions. I think if we have to do one of those two things, which by the way we don't. The real choice is C, stop making new editions every 3 years. But if we're going to have a new edition, if that's the weight we must carry, I'd rather they just go, all the old battle tomes are invalid. Here's an indice with everything in it, Ravening Horde style or whatever. Legitimately.
and honestly, I think with what they've found with the General's Handbook releases, like they found this technology now where they don't need new editions.
Sure.
Like they,
Yep.
I don't think they need them. Like they can just keep tweaking and evolving things.
Yep.
Um, they don't need these major rules overhauls every 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the D&D example, right? They made 5th edition. That edition is now 10 years old. Okay, or about to be.
Mhm.
I shouldn't say it. It's about to turn 10. And they've done this massive public playtest for the last year, right? Of potential new content. Taking big swings, trying things, and then deciding they're not going to do it, being very open and transparent about what's going on. They had some serious missteps as well along the way, but like really insanely stupid missteps. But like the design process has been very open and transparent, and ultimately, they're not flipping to a new edition. Like it's still what comes out is still going to be completely backwards compatible, just 5th edition with polish, effectively, right? So they went 10 years on one edition. And what they did is exactly what you said. They used some of the supplementary books to be like, here's optional class features and let's reshape things and new versions of and options within a class or something like that, right? And so whatever, right? It does I agree with you. Like one because of the General's Handbook tech, we can do a lot to reinvent the game. Like battle packs can upend any battle packs can overwrite anything in the core rules. Anything,
Yeah.
right? You could have a battle pack that says all models now hit on ones all the time, and ones don't automatically miss when rolling a hit roll. Like that, you could write that. The game wouldn't fall off. I mean, it would. It'd be terrible, but like you could do it, right? It's not as though there's some kind of limit as to what battle packs can change, and so that's my whole point. All right. So, but ultimately, in my estimation, each edition has strengths and weaknesses. And so we're going to look back today and we're going to look without any rose colored glasses. We're going to be cold objective observers of the good and the bad from these editions. And lastly, these will not be all inclusive. There will be stuff we miss, and that's where I want you to say the things that that you feel we're missing out of any given edition. All right, Paul, do you feel prepared? Are you ready?
am as cold as ice and willing to sacrifice our love.
Paradise, and the feeling was a nice. All right, let's do it. Here we go. Pop. Age of Sigmar, version 0. All right. Version 0.0. I suppose we could call this 0.5.
Open beta?
Yeah, open beta. Yes. I'm not sure. We could call this lots of things. But specifically what we're referring to is the period of time between July 4th, 2015, which was the official launch of Age of Sigmar, Independence Day here in the United States, through July 2016, either the release of the Sylvaneth Battle Tome, which was the first official Battle Tome with like as we would currently view them, right? Like they have points and those kinds of things in them, right? Like real rules and allegiance abilities and stuff like that. Or the GHB, which came out the same month, basically at the same time. There's a small difference in there in weeks, but it's historically irrelevant. And that was sort of the end of this. I think you agree. I think I agree with you. Open beta, this exploratory period, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just tackle the good here first. Let's not talk the bad for a minute. We're gonna stick on the good, Paul. Okay.
Yep.
So my good is community building. This was a great time for a lot of initial community building. I met a lot of great people there who jumped in early, who we were like, willing to try to make this game, talking about it. There was a lot of like people who came into the community who hadn't been here before or who stuck around, who didn't leave, and who built something out of the sort of fire that was like, I suppose this is like what I'm saying here is after a massive forest fire is when the forest sees the most growth, right? But it was a dark time. Like a lot of people left the game, Not that it was that big to begin with. Fantasy Battles had already atrophied quite a bit, but more left. But then that year was like a year of real amazing growth and passion. It's where I met Tyler for the first time. It's where I met Chuck for the first time. Like a lot of these people. It's how I came to know people I now call very dear friends, right? And so I think that's a strong strength. Because we had no option. The mothership was silent and giving us nothing. We all had to fend for ourselves, right? We had to come together as a group and like make a game of this. Yeah. And I would also put in this section things like the people who did the work to early put points on stuff, like Mo, just Kyle Nelson just mentioned Mo Comp, right? But there was other similar things at the time, SCGT Comp, right, which is built and sort of aligned with Mo Comp, but these kinds of things, right? People who were putting points on things, allowing tournaments to happen. What's that?
Like 3 or 4 different comp systems that came out around the same time.
Yep.
They were all fairly similar-ish.
Yep. Agreed. They were all in the same space. Like people disagreed on exactly what something was worth, maybe here or there on some individual units. But it was similar structure. Everyone kind of coalesced around the same concept. 5 Liberators is 100 points. Let's go. Right? Like,
yep.
We had lots of...
I think
go ahead. Good.
I think the big differences were in I think everybody figured out pretty easily how to balance like units against each other that were fairly vanilla-ish. It was when you had like heroes with weird abilities and wizards and things that had really less quantifiable abilities on them. That was hard to price.
Yep.
And it still is.
It still is.
Like those are still things that have wrong points,
Yep. Those like utility heroes were so undercosted at that time period, it was wild.
Yep.
The other thing I'll say for this early period is they did do a lot of experimentation in this first year.
Yeah.
You know, they were trying a lot of different things, like as far as what books they released. You know what was that's true for the community and for them. They were trying things. So I mean, you know, shout out. That's great. Like this is a good time to it. I think you exactly nailed it when you said open beta. It's 100% what it felt like living through that time.
Yeah.
Right. Um.
Yeah. And I think, in kind of what we learned about that period of time afterward and kind of what they were, at least what they said they were intending with all of this, it seems like they really wanted Age of Sigmar to kind of be a sandbox and let all of us figure out what we wanted the game experience to be.
Yep.
And they didn't put points on it and things like that because they wanted us to figure out what we thought it all should be. Not that they wanted us to balance the game for them, but that it wasn't intended to be that to begin with. That it was an open sandboxy sort of experience,
Yep.
that it wasn't supposed to be balanced. Um, and I think mission accomplished.
Sure.
Um,
They heard feedback. That's for sure.
yeah, it. I think they and they really, I think they did seem to take a lot of feedback from that period, and they
Sure.
responded very quickly.
Yep. Oh,
They
this is
they got that feedback really quickly that no points in this thing was a terrible idea and turned around a coherent point system for the entire game in less than a year.
sure. I mean, the it's really hard to explain how hard it was to talk about playing the game at that time period because there was actually no formal structure to play the game, right? We used SCGT comp mostly to play here, in my group of friends. And to like try to explain to somebody who's just dead new to this thing. Okay, so this is the game, and then we go to this other random community website, and they have points for how to actually build your army, and like rules around it is wild, right?
Mhm.
Um, and the other thing I listed as the good 4 pages of rules was a real bold move. Like that
Oh yeah.
is crazy, right? To think about your
Mhm.
flagship game and them trying to crack it down to that. Would you like a fun story, Paul? Would you like a fun behind the curtain story?
I love behind the curtain stories. Those are like my favorite thing.
Okay, I don't know if everybody in the audience, maybe people know this, maybe they don't, but
I think I may have heard this story before, if it's the
sure,
story that I'm thinking of.
we'll see. So Jervis Johnson, who was a game designer for Games Workshop for many, many years, had a long and storied career, created many of some of the greatest games GW has ever had, and is just widely respected in his field as a game designer. Somebody who I have a lot of respect for. He was given charge to create the rules for AoS. This was his he wasn't the only person who contributed, obviously, but he was lead on it and was the primary person responsible for writing the rules. And he wrote the rule set, and the mandate was it had to be very, very small. When I say mandate, I mean this came from the top. Okay. And it had to be short and simple and easy, right? Because they really, as an executive team, had identified that complexity had killed Warhammer Fantasy Battles. It's too complicated. It's too hard to start. People come in, they look at a book like that, and they're like, nope. It's funny now that we're back to those books for both editions, right? But they look at that and they we need a better way to deliver simple rules to people. So he wrote a 12-page rules treatment, okay, that he was really happy with. It covered most everything he thought made the game function. And he turned in the 12-page document, and they were like, no, we said it has to be 4 pages. It needs to be 4 pages. And he's like, it's a PDF. Who cares? It's 8 pages. Like, the difference between 4 and 12, it's still an obscenely simple game, right? And they were like, nope, unmoving. 4. We said 4, it'll be 4. We're launching with 4. That's it. Do it or don't work here. Okay? So he went back and he gutted his 12 pages down to 4 pages. Okay? Now, do you remember sometime after the 4-page launch when we got the 12-page addendum? You remember that this eventually happened? Remember we got the, like, 12-page rule set? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
That's basically him restoring the original rules write-up. Now, not completely. Some of it had to be switched around and changed because of things that had been cut and had to be changed because of the shorter size and so on. But, like, ish. So it's just very funny. I mean, I think he should feel vindicated as all get out for that one, certainly. But, I mean, ultimately it was very... I do think, like... I think if they had launched with 4 pages of rules and a points index, completely different response. Completely different response. I think that's it.
And I feel like even now, if you take those initial 4 pages of rules, I feel like that's still like the on-ramp to learn Age of Sigmar now. Like, if you want to introduce somebody to Age of Sigmar that hasn't picked up any miniatures game before, you hand them that 4 pages of rules and they're like, okay, this is like the bare bones basics of this game. Check this out. This will give you the basic understanding. We can run through a couple of games with that, and then we can build on the rest of the rules after that.
Yep.
And they really, like, that really was and still is the bones of the game.
Absolutely.
They haven't really changed.
Nope. The bare bones of what's presented in that 4-page document or the 12-page addendum, that followed shortly after within this year are pretty much the AOS we're playing today. I mean, it's been refined and corner cases have been explored and all of that stuff. But I agree with you. Like, I want to see that 12-page thing still exist in some form, right? Like the onboarding methodology still be there. Like, I mean, I appreciate that we've well explained everything and had all these steps, but boy, does a lot of it not need to be kind of there right away. So there you go.
We need like an Age of Sigmar quick start rules.
It's exactly what George just said in the comments, and I agree completely. Yep. I mean, we've been harping on this channel about the need for a simple startup thing for a long time. Apparently, there was some kind of thing published in White Dwarf that had some kind of starter battle pack, but it was published over a couple White Dwarves. I don't know. I need to go. First of all, terrible delivery method for that. Whoever keeps deciding to put this stuff in White Dwarf, please stop. Please stop. Okay? It is a magazine. This is 2023, year of our Lord. Are you for real? Okay?
Yes. Stop hiding things in a publication that is just an antiquated, obsolete medium. Like,
yes.
It shouldn't be there. It shouldn't exist.
I was complaining about Tomes Celestials. We'll talk about those a little later on. You remember those, Paul? I was complaining about those the whole time they were happening. That was like 4 or 5 years ago, or whatever.
Like if they want to have them in the White Dwarf, sure, but they should be in a PDF online for free too.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't be exclusively paywall locked in this paper thing that you have to go to a store and buy.
Exactly. All right. That's all I have for the good, Paul. Did I miss anything for the good from Age of Sigmar version 0, the open beta test year?
I think there were actually a lot of things in the initial Compendium War Scrolls that they released were actually really good and actually really stuck around.
Sure.
A lot of their initial, like a lot of the reorganization of the factions that we ended up having now, where we have the subgroups within armies and the bigger picture of how armies fit together, um, all of that, very little of that has actually changed ever since those Compendium War Scrolls were launched. Most of that was all already outlined in those.
Yep.
And there were a bunch of War Scrolls that even though, again, we're now 9 years down the line, 8 years down the line, a lot of these War Scrolls have barely changed.
Yep.
And they're still basically holding up. So I think a lot of like the initial rules writing was functional. It worked. It was pretty good. One of the silly things that like stuck out to me is that like Archaon's Slayer of Kings
Right. Right.
ability. If you look back to the old Compendium War Scroll, when he was just his little dude on a horse before the big badass model came out that we had, which was just like a couple of months probably after Age of Sigmar launched. It's the exact same rule as it's on his current War Scroll.
Right.
Cleaned up wording. It's the same rule though.
It's roll to hit, roll 2 6s on the wound, in the sword you go. Yep, get in the sword.
Yep. And that's not the only rule like that. There were a lot of things that they came up with. Like they wrote a lot of cool, interesting rules that have stuck around and were fair and fun. And I think there a lot of things in there that were crappy, that were unbalanced, that had all kinds of problems. Yes. I think we really do need to give them a lot of credit for the things that they were very successful on, though,
Sure.
in those Intermediate War Scrolls.
Yeah, for I mean the those core bones, whether it be the core rules and sort of the hit and wound and rend and damage and the way the saves work and leadership, like all that stuff stuck around. It's all there. It's all more or less become the heart of the game, right? And a lot of the rules on the individual war scrolls. You mentioned the Slayer of Kings, but there's many more that are like that, where you look at them now, you look at them then, and it's still very similar. So yeah. All right, let's talk about the bad. Let's hit the bad, Paul. There's a lot of
Oh
bad.
God,
Okay.
do we even need to harp on there was no points because there
I
was no
mean,
points? Do we
there was
mention
no
there
points.
was no points and nobody had any
Yeah.
idea of how to balance this game?
Yeah. People were trying wounds. That's obviously nonsense. I can't obviously that didn't work from the jump. We mentioned the
Yeah,
community TOs like MoComp and SCG Comp and stuff like that would come in. Thank God. But like, it was so hard to have a tournament. Adepticon that first year, so I went there. Okay, that first year, if memory serves, I might get the exact number just slightly wrong. I'm sure Alex could correct me at some point, but I believe it was 63 players, and that was like one of the biggest tournaments in the U.S. This is in March of 2016, right? That's rough.
yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, there are many smaller games that would kill to have 60-person tournaments. Okay.
Mhm.
If they get like a 20-person tournament, that's like their national event. All right. But for the sort of flagship fantasy game of the industry, boy, that's tough, you know, because it was just really hard to organize a tournament. And related to this, there was just no real on ramp to actually playing the game, because you had this great simple rules pack. It was great for going, look, this is how you play the game. It's so easy, right? But then you had no way to actually then connect that to doing the thing, to making an army and doing the thing. It's just like a shocking lack of insight there. And I agree, Cygnus. Everybody should be hitting like. Come on, hit like for the bad early years that probably many of us skipped. But I was here. I was here.
Yeah. And I think if you look at the initial 4-page rules, there was sudden death win conditions. And I think that, like, rereading that, because I forgot that even existed until I
Sure.
reread the rules. Um, that really shows like the clear disconnect that they didn't understand what the balance of the game was. Because that was you get a special, easier win condition if you have fewer models on the board than your opponent does.
Right.
Like, that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
That should not mean anything to anybody ever. Um, so, um, and I definitely remember playing with those rules, and there were so many instances where you would get the sudden death victory condition clicked on, and it was like you're you are at a huge advantage, and you have sudden death.
Right.
Like,
Right.
this doesn't make sense.
No, absolutely. It's so funny. I oh gosh, that's I again one of those things that I had forgotten. Like my brain just like cut that out of existence. Right? It was like no, that was because I think to me we never used those. It was just like nope. And that is amazing to look at 4 pages of rules and go and cut something. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't making the cut. Like we're gonna skinny this down even more. So yeah. Um, the there's one more thing here. I don't remember. Obsidian Crane said, "Wasn't their point initially to play more narratively and less competitively?" Yeah, I think they had that concept, but again, it's hard to connect that how it is. Like narrative play still needs some kind of structure around it, right? Otherwise, you're just going bang, I shot you, no, you didn't, right? That kind of thing. And um, Cygnus said, "One more thing for the good round bases just look so much better." Yes, agreed. Like one of my things I'm least excited about is for the old world is the concept of square bases. I just think square bases are ugly. I do not know why they didn't go to rounds in a square tray, like for old world. Anyway, not what we're talking about. Few other things that were really wild during this first year. Lots of strange books that wouldn't age well or sell well or anything like that. Chaos Dreadholds, my dog.
Yeah. Yep.
We would take 2 bites at this apple before we let it die. By the by. Okay.
Hmm.
Two. Two Chaos Dreadhold books. That is crazy. The Extremist Chamber getting their own not book.
Yeah.
Right? Just craziness. Okay. Now I want to talk about this one.
Yeah.
This is the one George has been banging on the whole time in the chat.
Hmm.
Silly War Scroll rules. Okay? So this is like your beard is longer and more full and your mustache is better and you don't kneel because Cetra never kneels and you shout wah and so on and so forth. Okay? I submit to you and George, let me explain to you why you're wrong. Because no matter how fun any of us think and or silly thought those rules were, we liked them, we didn't like them, I don't care. Okay? Those did more to damage the reputation of this game than anything else that they have ever put out or done ever. To this day, I'll be watching people talk with a tangential familiarity of AoS, and they'll say, yeah, that's the game with the silly rules where you gotta like measure your mustache or something, right? Like it gets mentioned. Just this last week, I saw it pop up in a video. Okay? Like, this did reputational damage to the game because it became an unserious thing. Right? And there is a difference between fun and funny and unserious. Okay? Warhammer has always been fun and funny and goofy and had, like various levels of satire and comedy and stuff like that to it. And I love all of that. And it should be there. And I've often argued we need more of it. Whether it be classic orcs in 40K or cyberpunk stuff, in Necromunda gangers and, talking about that kind of thing or whatever. Your mention of cod pieces and silly outfits. on the Empire earlier in the show, right? But it made the game feel unserious in a way that just was like, oh, they don't care about this. This is stupid. It's stupid. That's how it read. It read as stupid. Okay? Now, it wasn't a deal breaker for me. I'm still here. I was playing it then. I'm still playing it now. And what every TO did was immediately strike all of those rules and say they're nothing, and cut them from the scroll, right? But 9 years later, if you hear, people will talk about this as why Age of Sigmar is a dumb game. And those things haven't been there for 8 years.
Yeah, it went from, this is we're going to do something that's funny to we're going to make it a joke.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
And the thing is, I was curious recently, so I started going through all of those old compendiums just to see, what were all of these rules? There weren't even that many of them.
No, there wasn't.
They were all so ridiculous. They were just so dumb that they stuck out. They really were very lightly sprinkled in, but it didn't matter. It was a potent enough poison that it just poisoned everything.
Absolutely. It was 100% a poison pill, right? And what sucks is it's still in the system. It's still in the zeitgeist because the statement, if you only get one chance to make a first impression, that was a lot of people's first impression. And as people have said in the chat, you're coming straight off the end times. We've blown up the old world. We've killed your game. We've killed everything you love. And now what's replacing it is a silly game where you measure and compare mustaches. Yeah. Like, now it's not just dumb and unserious. It feels insulting. Yeah. Okay? Now, look, I'm not one to spare a tear over most of the people that we lost and still haven't regained. If you're still butthurt about the old world being destroyed when it's coming back next year, like, I don't know, man. You got to find things to, like, you got to find some happiness in your life. I really do hope that you find, like, some kind of joy, because you got to stop holding on to things like that. That's not psychologically healthy for you. Okay? But I can understand the raw emotion in that moment of it feeling like, oh, well, this just isn't the game for me. I'm not talking about people walking around with a grudge or being angry or burning their little toys on the internet like a child, right? I'm talking about just them, like, of the vast majority of people who would look at that and go, oh, okay, this just isn't for me. They're not walking away angry. They're not walking away hurt. They're just walking away.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it just made the game feel unserious, unfinished, and like a joke. And I don't know what we'll ever do. Like, eventually that will pass out of the zeitgeist, but my God, almost a decade in, it still hasn't. And it's going to take a while. I think that is the worst thing about AoS 0.0 was those silly war scroll rules. Now, I don't count in there minigame stuff. Okay? So what I mean by that is there's a section of war scrolls with rules that were introduced in this initial edition that had minigames in them that we ended up mostly cutting at this point in the game. So for example, here we go. You ready? You ready, Paul? You ready? We're going to play a game. All right, Paul. Right or left hand? Which one?
With the left hand.
Left hand. Paul, you're dead. Okay. So, no, but like Hand of Dust or the little Skink Priest mini game or, stuff like that, right? I found those genuinely fun because I liked actually breaking up the game and just playing a little sub mini game. I've always liked stuff like that. And those don't feel too silly. Mm-hmm. They feel like little blind man's bluff games and stuff like that. Those I legitimately do not think damage the game. If those had been the only things you saw in those, and that was sort of the edge of the quote unquote silliness, no problem. No problem. Everybody in Warhammer would have accepted that without a passing glance, because that's just another way to roll dice, right?
Like Hand of Dust is just a more fun way to do a roll of 4-up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's just a way more engaging way to do it. It feels a lot more tense, right?
Yeah.
So like people would have accepted that stuff. They were the right space, and that's what drives me the most crazy about those other rules is that they had things like that in there again, sprinkled lightly as you mentioned, that were so well designed, that were so cool, and then they would just like, and then they had these other things that were just they went off the rails. So, okay.
Yeah. And there were other ways that they could have done it that would have inspired players to still participate in ways like that,
Mm-hmm.
that didn't say you must do X to get benefit in game.
Right.
Right? Like it could have flavor text that said, whomever has, was it like Marius Lightdorf with the mustache or something?
Sure.
Or no, who was the guy that like pretended to he
My
was
my
crazy
favorite
and
was the vampire guy who was crazy, Conrad von Karstein. If you talk to your dice, you could reroll hits. If they talk back to you, you get to reroll wounds. Like, come on now, what are we doing?
yeah, it's they could have put something like flavor text in that kind of had the implication, but didn't tell you to do it. Didn't say you had to do it.
Right.
That kind of like that maybe like nudged you, like gave you like a wink and a nudge to do the role play, but didn't tell you you had to.
Right.
And that would have been a completely different scenario, I think.
Yep. Yep. And the final thing I'll say on the bad is, despite how many I think you're right, good rules and things that have carried on some of the compendium scrolls, woof, were those things wildly unbalanced. Like, holy Moses. Yeah. They were just, I mean, the deltas there were crazy, internal and external. It was truly the Wild West time, right? Um, yeah.
And um, adding on to that too, there was, other than Grand Alliance, there was nothing like bounding your army construction in any way. So um, you would just mix and match your war scrolls from any army. So there were so many war scrolls that could interact with each other. They couldn't possibly play tested all of that. There were interactions that nobody would ever have anticipated.
Yeah, that first year I mentioned Adepticon. I remember Brad from the Detroit club just tearing up tables with the true terror of that time, of that early period, which was like 3 Thunder Tusks and 4 hordes of goblins or something like that. Like it was like goblin night goblin hordes and Thunder Tusks to snowball people, right? Because they just did like wild amounts of mortal wounds. The Thunder Tusk is still in a timeout from its initial bustedness. Yeah. It was so busted in the first year, it got put in a timeout, and now 8 years later, it's still in timeout and is a garbage war scroll. It's so funny to me how long some scrolls have to spend in timeout after they were too good.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean the compendium scrolls were like not at all balanced. They were clearly just like someone's first pass.
Yeah.
No development work was done there.
Yeah. And then we got like the second pass when we got the 4 Grand Alliance books had like all of the updated war scrolls. And then that also just produced this limbo of like, well, all of these war scrolls that aren't in here and weren't updated, are they just not in here? are they getting discontinued? They didn't really
Ah,
tell us what was going on with them. We just had this giant limbo of like, what's going on with this? Like, like it wasn't
Paul.
officially Legends yet. Like Legends
Yep,
wasn't a
yep, yep,
thing yet.
yep. You have perfectly segued for us to leave behind. So here we are, July 2016. We get GHBs, we get Grand Alliance compendiums. That brings us to Age of Sigmar version 1.0. Okay. So in 1.0, some things change. Okay, so this is July 2016 through June 30th, 2018, the launch box of second edition. So what was the good? Points! Points ball! GHB 2016.
And Force organization. It
And
wasn't
force
just
organization
point,
charts. Yes.
which, by the way, has not been revisited, other than adding other things onto the list of restrictions. Uh, People at GW, that if I'm sure you're listening to this, please God, look at this again. This doesn't make sense anymore.
Uh I mean, I would just love it if we took reinforcement points and just shotgunned them to the moon. In just yeet them into the sun in AOS 4.0. Why are they there? They don't need to exist. We're fine.
No, no. The sun is too good for them. They need to go.
Just in the cold,
They
dark
need to.
heart of deep space.
They need to be jettisoned. They need a one-way ticket into the center of a supermassive black hole, never to be
Sure.
seen again.
Absolutely.
I don't know what problem they thought they were fixing with this, but the only thing that they have done is given me anxiety
Sure.
and anger.
I understand. I'm with you completely. As a longtime Skaven player, believe me, who has to buy Rat Ogre units in functions of two? Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel it. I feel it a lot. Okay. GHBs from this time, I submit to you, Paul, were some of the best that they've made. In fact, I will go a step farther and say that General's Handbook 2017 is still the best overall General's Handbook they have made in the history of AOS. Now, the match play scenarios in like the current GHB, I think, are better. All right.
Mhm.
They're more balanced. But taken as a whole, 2017 GHB, all-time banger, best of the best, number one when looked at holistically. It had Triumph and Treachery. It had teams games. It had multiplayer scenarios. It had all this different stuff in it, right?
Back to
It
glory.
yeah, path like absolutely. It introduced allegiance rules. They were good. They were
Yeah.
fun. And it's so funny because when we get to 2.0, we're gonna talk about this. But we got basically like allegiance rules, right? And it felt great. Like I honestly, legitimately, I remember when the Iron Jaws book first came out, I was scared because the original Iron Jaws rules, which were printed on 2 pages on the very back of GHB 2017, like it's literally the back cover,
Yep.
right? It's so wild to me that they printed rules on the front side of the back cover, the different hard binding, not on the piece of paper in the book, on the back cover, was great. I played the heck out of it. It was one of my favorite time playing Iron Jaws, and I was like, they're going to ruin it. They didn't. Every Iron Jaws book has more or less gone from strength to strength, um, but like they were fun. Were they perfect? No, but they were good. We had Grand Alliance rules, right? So you could play Grand Alliance Death or Chaos or stuff like that. Again, this should be a thing. It should still be a thing. Maybe it's not a thing in the event battle pack. Okay? Like in the event battle pack, which is meant to be for tournaments, there's no, you have to play according like how we think of it now, where things are balanced and tight and stuff like that. Fine. But in a general battle pack or a narrative battle pack or some other battle pack, we should allow Grand Alliance rules. Let people go nuts. Bring different stuff together. It's not for a tournament. It's not. Who cares? Who cares? Just give people that, like,
Yeah.
yes, you could do it. You could just in your basement right now decide that's the rule. But if you give people a permission structure, they will actually do it, right?
Yeah. That's it, even though we all intuitively know we can just do whatever we want, people are still going to look at the rule book and say, "Oh, these are the rules. I have to play by the rules," even though there's no one standing over their shoulder making them do it.
Right. Right. Exactly. I think the other good from this is also the time of just explosive community growth. I mean, once we got points back in and GHB 2016 hit, I mean, we just saw AoS take off like a rocket ship, right?
Yeah.
The GHBs were amazing. The rules were were fun. People felt like it was good. Now there was many bad things here. We're going to talk about them. Okay?
Oh yeah.
Many. But this was a time of just unbridled growth. People were like, okay, this is a game now. We're out of the open beta. Right?
Yep.
It gave us a game we could play. Weird.
Yeah. We got a
The
real
difference
game.
the difference in tone. So I met with GW at Adepticon 2016 and had a talk with some of the leaders and designers. And we had a lot to say. Like Tom and I showed up with a very big packet of feedback, like a printed packet. Okay.
Wow.
And the difference in tone between 2016 and 2017 was so marked. There was still feedback we had. We weren't like into a great place, but it was so different. And then 2017 to 2018, different world. Like over the course of this edition, we would see the game, I think, become a real game. It's a real boy. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, Paul, let's talk about the bad. You brought this one up in the chat for the first time. I had to go back and remember because I'll be honest, this is another thing I blanked out. Paul, you want to talk about summoning a little?
Yeah. So initially, the way summoning originally worked in Age of Sigmar was it was all spells that were on war scrolls, but not in the way that you would probably expect. It was spells on the war scroll of the thing getting summoned. So if you had a chaos wizard, they could just summon any chaos demon that you happen to have in your collection. They just knew all of the spells to summon those. They roll the dice. They hit that number that is on, whatever the spell is to summon that particular chaos demon. Just pop that onto the board. That was before points were a thing. And then, oh, by the way, now points are a thing. And they didn't really address that initially. If I'm remembering correctly. And then
correct. So you could summon anything and just go nuts. Then we got points, and then they realized summoning was a problem, and so their fix for it was,
oh, now you have to just play down points.
right.
Like, oh, if you want to summon things, okay, now you have to play a 1,500 point list, and you have a 500 point summoning pool.
Right.
You can summon up to 500 points worth of stuff.
Yep.
It was like the worst fix.
Yes.
I don't know why they did that. Other than they would have had to write real rules to fix all that, which they eventually did. God, it brought all of those armies that were summoning things. It took them from being like the best armies to they do not appear anywhere.
Right.
No one will bring them because now they are trashed. The one thing that army did that was good it cannot do anymore.
Right. Right. Yep. Yep. And I think so. Assistant Ref says, "Let's be honest, summoning is still bad now, 7 years later. Not as bad, true, but still bad. The worst thing about AOS, in my opinion." Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd call it the worst thing. I think summoning, for the most part, has been fixed. I don't think summoning is actually the problem now. I think recursion is actually the problem right now. Like most anyone that summons, for the most part, is quite limited on your quote unquote summoning of like just generating new units. If you play Nurgle, you probably get a unit, maybe two, over the course of the game, depending on what you summon, and they're going to be pretty minimal units, right? It's like a plague, it's like a Sloppity Bile Piper and a few Plague Bearers, right? We're not talking about game altering numbers here. The Slanesh summoning wildness was like that. That was the problem. So that's why I think recursion, like my problem's not summoning, it's the whole unit died, half of it comes back, the whole unit died, the whole unit comes back, the 40 models out of the unit died, I rally half of them back on a 4-up. Like all of that stuff to me is way more offensive than somebody bringing on 10 plague bearers and then in like a inopportune place on the board, right?
Yeah.
So like the recursion is actually a far deeper problem to me now than summoning.
Yeah. There was just insane possible abuse in the first version of summoning, though. Like, just because of the rules loophole to it. Like, let's say you have a Tzeentch Demon Prince. He's a wizard, so he can cast a spell to summon more demons. He himself is a demon, so he can be summoned. So you take him, he in your hero phase, he casts a spell, summons another Tzeentch Demon Prince. Okay, now you have that second Tzeentch Demon Prince. Well, there's nothing stopping him from now a third Tzeentch Demon Prince. That one comes on, fourth Tzeentch Demon Prince. And you just chain them until you fail a die roll.
Right.
Or run out of models. So like that was the problem with it. Like it was just it didn't stop. And then there was the original Chaos Lord. His command ability was just summon a unit on the board edge.
Yep.
It was like, what? It's like just it was either knights or warriors. Just there you go, bring them on.
Yeah.
Every turn.
Yeah. And this doesn't have the like AOS does not have the depth of response to handle that situation like something like Magic does, right? You can play a Magic game where your whole strat is like Commander, for example. You like my whole strat is attacking with this one creature. I will may very likely only have this one creature in play ever. It's a hardcore Tron build, right? I'm gonna kill everybody else at this table with one person, right? One dude, one card, right? That's a functional playstyle. And then somebody across the table is going super wide. They're making potentially hundreds of little dudes tokens and stuff like that. They're trying to swarm, right? And like Magic has the sort of depth of resources and responses to be like, yeah, okay, those are both valid and both players can answer each other in a myriad number of ways, right?
Yep.
And both will be advantaged and disadvantaged in different ways. This had no such counterbalance, right? It was just like, nah, more free points is good. You're just doing more, right? Go wide was just good. And that leads to my second point here of the bad. Again, during AOS 1.0, we still had terrible balance. I mean, we don't have data from this time period. This is like when you're talking about elections, pre 19, whenever they started doing polling, right? I think it started polling in like the 40s or whatever. You don't really have good data historically to understand this stuff. You just have to kind of intuit what was happening. And this is the same thing, but like if you played in that time, you knew it. You knew it. There was just things that were bent sideways, right?
Yeah. There are a lot of things that aren't exactly in the rules now as well that are just sort of in their design principles as well that like now you don't summon things into combat or teleport things into combat ever.
Right.
I don't think there's a single thing in the game right now that can do that. But there were multiple things in AOS 1 that could do that.
Sure.
There like the whole
Excuse me.
bless you. The whole concept of the old Vanguard wing list. Like,
Sure.
while we're here, might as well start talking about Vanguard wing because this was like this just had a laundry list of sins that made that list busted.
What do
Right?
you do? Well,
It
I've
was
got like 30 liberators, and I teleport them into combat with you, hit whatever I want,
yep,
and then every round re-teleport them and set them up to be chopping whatever I want. And they don't die.
yep, yep, and all like they were getting buffs that were all based on being within a radius, not wholly within.
Sure,
So you could
sure.
just conga line them across the board.
Yep.
It the coherency rules didn't require really anything. You just had to the next time you moved, you had to just reform back into coherency.
If possible.
So
If not, you couldn't move. Right.
so it, so you just pulled models out of the middle and it didn't do anything. And so you just kept your stuff in combat at one end and you kept your stuff getting the buffs at the other end. And
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
you had no punishment for doing that.
Yeah, Paul, let me share a story with you. I believe this has to be NashCon 2017. That sounds right. So NashCon 2017. I'm there. Round 4, I come up against one Mr. Lord of Death, Brendan Melnick, who was running at the time. I was running Iron Jaws. You know, pigs, Maw Crusher, some brutes, you know, Iron Jaws. And Brendan was running Nagash, a Necromancer, and like 3 units of 40 skeletons. Okay? Something like that. Maybe there was a couple other small pieces in there, but that's basically the list. Now, already I'm up against it. Okay? Like, this is a terrible matchup for me because he can, like, recur his troops in an insane way. And I was like, well, high chance of loss means I need to employ a high variance strategy. So I stayed out of his spell range for a round, moved all my pieces into place, and then charged into his 2 skeleton units with everything I had. Just everything. I hit him with basically my army. Because if I could wipe the units out completely, they couldn't recur. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I killed 1 unit completely, all 40 skeletons, lifted them. Keep in mind, this was actually pretty tough, because remember, these things had, like, just lots of weird defense stacking at this time, right? Mm-hmm. And then I killed 39 of the 40 skeletons in the other unit. And there was 1 skeleton way over here sitting on a gravesite. I'm sorry, I killed 38. I apologize. It's 38. I was too short. I'm sorry, Paul. This is relevant. Because 1 was sitting over here on a gravesite, and the other one was in my lines, still alive. Right? I mean, they were 3.5 feet apart, but they were a unit. Right? Rolls over to Brendan's turn. And he then recurs a bunch of his skeletons and conga lines them out from his line where I have engaged him. Like, this is his side of the board up here, right? So I've engaged him here. My whole army's here. And he then recurs his troops through a gap in my line and takes his skeletons and recurs them in a conga line all the way down and then tees them out and takes my points behind me. Right? And then just Nagash starts killing his way through my troops. Right? And his whole unit's basically back. I mean, the recursion was wild. Right? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about balance in that time period. Right? And the within thing.
Yeah, it was just. I mean, part of the fun of that time period, though, was that it was like everybody was swinging for the fences like that.
Oh,
I
sure.
mean, not everybody. It wasn't. There were a lot of different lists that were doing crazy swinging for the fences stuff.
Sure, absolutely. All right. Other things. Lots of strange distinctions between armies. This is where we get the birth of the Dangler factions, Paul. Right?
Oh,
Like, shadow blades or whatever. This is a thing now, apparently. And just like
Yeah.
completely arbitrary distinctions within the sort of broader force as to what these things are for no reason. Things that they would end up doing it, separating them and legending some and bringing some back together. And that leads me straight into my next point, which was just you mentioned this right as we transitioned, right? Which was complete uncertainty over what would stay and what would go, right? Because they were getting divided in weird ways. You got some things put into legends over the course of this time. Like, what was here to stay? What was going to go away? Complete mystery. Complete mystery.
No roadmap at all.
Right.
And also along those lines too is, yes, we did have those. We did get allegiance abilities in the general's handbooks for a whole bunch of factions.
Sure.
But there were a whole bunch of those related factions to those that didn't get allegiance abilities.
That's right.
And they were just allies of this other stuff. So your choice was either you have this like very restrictive army that has allegiance abilities, that you can't really tap in very much into this ancillary stuff that feels like it's supposed to go with it.
Yep.
Or you don't really get allegiance abilities. You use the Grand Alliance allegiance abilities, but you get a wider variety of troops and you feel like you have a real army.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that was. I mean, I particularly felt that because I was playing, like Free Guild at the time. And that was before Nurgle got their first battle tome. And it was like, yeah, like Free Guild got allegiance abilities, but Ironwell Arsenal, Collegiate Arcane, Devoted of Sigmar, all of that stuff, and it wasn't part of Free Guild. It was separate sub-factions.
Right. Right.
Allied into Free Guild. Like, if you want to build a Free Guild army and you want to take a Celestial Hurricanum, like, okay, well, now you can't bring anything in any of these other
Sure. Beyond allying them in, yeah. And like, to your point, the actual battle tomes that would then launch with full rules right at the start of this were just like really weird and inequitably distributed, right? Over this time period, what did we get? Sylvaneth, Bone Splitters, Beastclaw, Disciples of Tzeentch, Stormcast, Khorne, Caradhran Overlords, their launch, right? And then they immediately got nerfed in the GHB for 2017. Tom is still sore about that to this day. Nurgle.
Well, that wasn't even really a nerf, if you recall.
Oh, the Thunderers
got
wild. It made them match the kit, but it was a nerf to their potential, as it were. But yes.
They said the wrong version of the thing to the printers.
It was, but like that didn't change anybody's opinion of what happened. But yes, I understand.
Like from the player optics perspective, like yes,
right.
it all got nerfed. From the 30,000-foot view version of what happened, they screwed up so bad.
Right.
Like
absolutely.
they just they sent the wrong file to the printers and nobody noticed until they had a pile of books in their warehouse.
Right.
Like.
Right. Yep. Nurgle, Nagash, Daughters of Cain, Idoneth, Deepkin. It's the launch of them as well. And so that was our like pointed battle tomes in 1.0. By the launch of the Daughters of Cain battle tome, still the best launch video of all time. While we're talking about best and worst, still the best one, unchallenged, just not even close. They have not come close to that initial Daughters of Cain launch video. It was incredible. It was perfect. It was amazing. It blew me away. I bought in a whole army because of it, which is not something I would normally do. And it was great. So there you go. At any rate, the goat.
Like right behind that too, they also had the Nurgle release videos that came after that, and they had like the Nurgle like at like 12 Days of Christmas.
Sure. Yep. Yep.
That was also a great video. Like whoever was making the videos in that time period was like just making bangers. They were doing
Yep.
great work then.
Yep.
I don't know what happened, but let's bring it back.
When did that tome come out? Sure. It would have been that tome came out in what, March or April, something like that. April, May of 2018. If you go back to their channel, it should be that video should be like the I mean, I have the video saved and favorited. It's in a playlist. Um and I have listened to that Marathi launch video on loop for probably 4 to 5 hours straight on repeat. It's a 30-second video, Paul. Okay. And I'm here for
I
it.
would imagine the majority of the views that GW has on that video are probably you at this
It's
point.
just me at this point. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it should be like something like December 2017 through January 2017 is when that should have come out. Probably an LVO reveal, my guess. Trying to restructure my brain. Anywho, one last thing, Paul, we got to talk about when we talk about 1.0. We got to talk about command abilities through the ages.
Oh, yes. When your command abilities could only be used by your general, and there were no command points yet.
Right.
And you only got whatever was on your general's war scroll and inspiring presence. That was it.
Yep.
And if you needed to use that, had to walk uphill both ways in the snow.
It's like, this your thing. This person can use this one thing if they're the general. Okay? That's it. End. Okay.
Oh, there's another quick note in here too that just reminded me of. This was also before they really stopped duplication of things and
Oh, yeah.
stacking
Yep.
abilities. But what actually reminded me of that was that with when the first GHB came out, there was nothing that said you couldn't take the same artifact more than once. So if you took a battalion, you get a second artifact, right? So I remember playing against Dez. He was playing Skaven all the time. He would
Sure.
take a battalion, and it would be, he would take 2 Conqueror's Crowns, so that he would never take battle shock tests with his Skaven. Because it mattered then. Because like they didn't get the any of the like no battle shock abilities on their war scrolls yet. Like that came with the first battle tome. So also like you could get lots of like +1 to hit, +1 to wound. You could go all the way down to a 1-up to hit and auto hit
Right.
this time period.
Right.
And you could get multiple wards. Go like,
oh yes, yes, my dog. How could we forget? Everything stacking. That's the take-home point, right? You're 100%. How many wards do you want, Paul? How many wards do you want? I got a 5-up and a 5-up and a 6-up. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah, you people and your stupid Daughters of Cain. All of the stacking and all of the rerolls. Reroll. We need to talk about reroll. The thing that we don't have anymore, that we got rid of because they were awful, but everything used to reroll.
Sure.
And you know what? We had to reroll ones all the time because we needed a more granular way to modify things. So we're going to reroll our ones.
I submit to you 1.0
there's
was not
one
the
good thing that there's one good thing that came out of rerolling ones.
okay.
That is YouTube channel. Shout
Sure.
out to Jack and crew.
Yep.
The
I will
only
argue
good
with
thing,
you
those rolling ones.
that 1.0 was not the height of reroll madness. Okay?
It was not. You are correct.
We're going to talk about that in a minute. Because
It got
1.0,
worse.
it just wasn't printed in enough places. That was the wasn't that there was any real restriction to it. 1.0 was the period of stack-a-lacka cracka, right? Because it was
Yeah.
just like, how many bonuses to hit do you want? And by the way, everything stacks and it's not an unmodified bonus. On a 6-up, you do a mortal wound. If you get +4 to hit, you're now doing that mortal wound on a 2-up, baby. Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And there you go. Damn, that trailer was dope. You're absolutely right, it was. I linked both the trailers in the chat. There's like the initial 1-minute video and then the 30-second follow-up where they actually reveal Marathi. Because she's only like partially teased in the first video. And just like that, you know, like you see the Canary and everything else. It's amazing. Anyways, now what you're talking about. Again, goat. But yeah, man, this was like that dark time of just like stacking was incredible. In our initial handout, that packet that we gave them, we had a massive section titled "We have to stop stacking." Okay? It was a huge point. Like we had pages on this of just like examples and why it's unhealthy for the game and what it leads to and how it warps army design and like everything. And by the way, eventually, as with everything we said in that packet, we were proven right. So, I mean, like, I'm not saying they took from us, because mostly they probably ignored us. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that history proved we were correct. Okay.
You're just claiming nerd supremacy, that's all.
I am claiming only that I was on the right side of history. I'm not claiming I affected change in any way, only that I was on the right side of history. Okay? At any rate, yes. So, like, stacking was the thing, right? You'd have, you know, just saves that would go to the moon, hit wound rolls that would go to the moon. Everything would just, like, stack to a high heck and back, and then trigger. That was the problem. It wasn't just that you could super stack, it was then you could super stack and trigger things that were, like, on an X+, right? There's this horrible combination of things, right?
Yep.
All right. So, 1.0. A lot of great times, but whoa, was there some bad stuff going on. Like, Jeezel Pete's.
Yeah. I know I said it before. I will say it again. Part of the fun of it was all of the insanity that was going on.
Sure.
It was, and it was a time.
Yeah, if you're like a chaos player, right? So like if in D&D, the first character you play or you prefer to play is like a wild mage sorcerer, right? Where it's just like, woo, let's see what happens, right? It's just like, maybe I make flowers or maybe a fireball blows up and kills everybody. Like, who knows? It's going to be a wacky time, right? If that's your bag, then you probably had a grand old time during this edition, right? Because it was a pretty wild time. So there you go. Okay. Let us now, Paul, jump forward and take our next step into the next edition. Let us go to AoS 2.0. I would argue where the game really sort of came into its own, but we still have a lot of like glaring issues. So this is June 30th, 2018 through July 2021, the launch box. Paul, fun story for 2.0. Here we go. This is fun story time. I was at Warhammer World for the launch of 2.0. I got to participate in some of the content and stuff. Like I got to be, you know, on the channel and doing an interview, and I got to play a game with Byron.
I watched that game on stream.
And they gave him the new Stormcast with like the kitty caters, and I got handed a truly ridiculous army of bad high elves. To say I got housed would be vastly undercutting the situation. but it was still a great time. I had a lot of fun there, and Ben Johnson tried to steal my USB cable to charge his phone, but I stole it back. No, it was a really great time. Like, it was honestly, like, legitimately two of the most fun days I've ever had, hanging out with everybody, playing Warhammer, participating in Golden Demon. Like, it was nonstop. It also, this is too long of a story to tell, so I would just summarize it as this: the drive from Warhammer World back to catch my aeroplane out of Heathrow was the worst trip I have ever had in my life. And I have been in car accidents. I have had my transmission fall out of my car while driving on the highway. This was worse. Okay. So, there we go. Anywho, let's talk about the good of 2.0. Yes, it was the Sword Masters and Mages. Yeah, that's right. I don't remember what it was either.
Actually, you real quick here first.
Yeah, go for it.
There was kind of like a 1.5,
Okay.
like 6 months. There were, and I think the first book might have actually been Daughters of Cain. Those books that, remember when they changed the branding, the bindings on the books?
Yeah, sure. The sort of lead up to 2.0, yeah, where we were like clearly already in 2.0
Yeah.
mode. Yes.
Right. They were clearly all already 2.0 designed books. They were released before the launch.
Right.
And like, I think the biggest thing out of that was like with the Nurgle battle tome, we saw what summoning was going to look like
Right.
when we got rid of
The reinforcement
the
points.
summoning pool.
Yeah.
And just had it strictly resource based. But we had the summoning point, like we had like the contagion points, but you still had the summoning point pool for a few months, and that was awful.
Yep. Good. Very good call. That's an excellent point to make. Yeah. No. Good call. All right. So as we move fully into 2.0, I think the good for me is we reach maturity, right? We got a full rule set. We've got the corners explored. Armies get books over the course of the edition. Like, most armies over the course of this edition would finally get a book, right? We cover basically everybody. We get some cool story beats. I think the story really comes into its own. We get like malign portents and malign sorcery and a lot of neat, zoomed in character stories here, right? This is where we get Soulbound launches during this time period, okay? Which opens up a lot of the world and like really has a, like, if you haven't played Soulbound, I do recommend it. It's a really, really great RPG. And it's just like ridiculously fun. So we get that kind of stuff, right? And we actually get to like understand the world in a deep way. We get command points and heroes in general using command points, right? As a resource. This is a thing now, right? And we get Broken Realms at the end of the whole thing, which I thought was actually pretty darn cool. Like, Broken Realms book 1, man, was just like, hey, stuff's going down. Get ready. This is for real, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that all felt really good to me. I mean, we'll stick on the good here, Paul. What are your thoughts on sort of the good of 2.0? What else did I miss, or what do you want to expound on there?
It all finally coalesced into a complete game.
Yep.
We, over the course of 2.0, we got rid of all of those allegiance abilities that were hanging out in the General's Handbook, all of that stuff. Like, all of the armies got battle tomes. Anything that didn't get a battle tome got discontinued. So everything was now like contained in a book that you could go to a store and buy off the shelf.
Yep.
Um, so it felt like they closed the loop on the game. Like it is done. It is a finished product now.
Yep.
It took them 6 years to get there, but it 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 finally felt done. It felt like it was, um, yeah, it felt like it was really completed. I think it made some really good additions with adding endless spells and the faction terrain pieces in concept. I think they might have overdone both of those a little bit. Um, there's definitely some that are there that just don't really need to be there. Um, but I think endless spells as a concept in general are awesome. I like I just personally really like that. Um, oh, excuse me. Um, I think they started really like they cleaned up the mechanics of the game and tightened up a lot of things. Um, uh, you know, first few years of the game, it still wasn't perfect, but it was a lot better. Like having command points, you can have
Right.
somebody other than your general use a command ability,
Right.
but um, like your general's still important. They're still your main guy, but you don't just have like your other heroes aren't just kind of there anymore.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so I think they went in a lot of really good design directions with it. Um, yeah, I think there was a whole lot of good in second edition. I think honestly, if I had to pick an edition of Age of Sigmar that I think rules wise was the best, I think it probably has been second edition so far.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but yeah, that's not to say that like where we're currently at is bad. I
Sure.
think there's just stuff in there that is excessively complicated, and you know they've gone on. We're not to third edition yet, but
No, it's all right. I
they've
mean, we
gone.
also get a lot of really great armies over this time. We get Sons of
Yes,
Behemoth. We get Ossiarch Bone Reapers. We get Nighthaunt, right? All of those are second edition additions to the game, right?
yeah, yep,
And I think those are really really strong, interesting tomes. We get a cities tome, which is basically we're in the last week of that being the official tournament cities tome now, as the new book comes out on Saturday, right? Lasted for a long
yep.
time. That I think a lot of us really enjoyed and played a lot of interesting games with. It hasn't aged super well, but it was really really interesting and stuff at the time. We get Lumineth. I'm not counting that in the good, but it did happen. So like I think there was a lot of army exploration at that time. I think when we look at the bad, for me, it's like the army books were so uneven over the course of this release. Like, good lord, these some of these releases were so unbalanced. And it would keep happening that they'd put out two books on the same weekend, right?
One would be awesome, one would be trash.
Exactly. It would be like one they clearly cared about and just like lavished with rules and capabilities, and one looked like they put it to a guy in the back office and just fired it out over the weekend, right? And that's where we got to like the good rules writer, the bad rules writer, whatever it was, like the good guy, the bad guy, or that whole thing that went around for a while. And like I'm sure that was annoying to them in the studio, but it was like, how do you put out the Ogre's book and the Zinch book in the same weekend and go, yeah, this seems like we're in the same ballpark here? Like, did you play these at all? The Zinch book, I don't know, Paul, if you remember the original Zinch book when it launched. Okay. That not the original, but the 2.0 Zinch book when it launched.
I mean, both of the like every Zinch battle tome I have tried to blank out of my memory. So,
All right,
you
well, let
know,
me re enlighten you. This came out at the end of 2019 into 2020. Okay. So I was over in Australia, the aforementioned story, right? At the very beginning. And the first tournament that was really got played in was CanCon. And I had been shouting from the rooftops about this Zinch book. And I, like, you could just do the math. Flamers were like so wildly out of balance. It was insane. And just like the Zinch player who was on top tables at the end, you could just like the armies he had burninated his way through. Many of them he had just lifted by turn two, just gone. They ceased existing. Ash on the wind, right? It was crazy. And like that book had changes so fast because it was so insanely out of balance. Meanwhile, the ogre book's over here like, hey, me too. I got ogres. Is that something? No? Okay, I'm bad then. It was just terrible. It was shocking.
I got snowballs.
Yeah. Oh boy. Oh boy, do ya. So it was just like, it was crazy how different they were. And I think what kind of, and yes, Sin and Bin, thank you, the Sin guy or the Bin guy. That was the two names for the reductive names for the rules writers. And so, like, I think what bothered me about that whole time period was this is also covers what we call the dark age of 2019, Paul. The dual rulership of FEC and Slanesh, of like of just like being complete terrors because there was nobody with high armor and nobody with shooting. So these two things just like ran wild across tables. Your keeper secrets making everybody fight last on a 2-up, just like running into the middle of the board and then spiking people like a football, right? And so it's just like it was crazy the different books that would come out, how different they felt. Okay. I put in the bad, I put faction terrain and endless spells. I really did. Now, maybe that's with the benefit of hindsight, but I hate them. I hate them. And yes, the activation wars of 2019. Thank you, Assistant Ref. Yes, that was the dark time. I really hate faction terrain and endless spells. I really do. I don't want them. Endless spells are almost perennially impossible to balance because, like an incarnate, they can be used by anyone. Right? So if they're even slightly too good, they show up in everybody's lists. They're all over the place, right? Think Purple Sun, right? When it was like printed and got way too good, right? So like having to hit that nail on the head of like sort of good sometimes in the right list, but not terrible, but not too good. Like you have the game on The Price is Right where the little red bar is moving up and down and you got to like make the price fall in the right spot. You got to stop and then there's like, bling, here's the price. And if it's in that area, you win, right? Endless Spell Balance is playing that game, but with a red bar that's about an inch high, right?
Yeah.
It's like ultra hard mode on it. Because every time we redo Endless Spells, what happens? 8 out of 10 of them are junk. 1 out of 10 of them gets used pretty decently. 1 out of 10 of them gets used in some lists or something like that, right? Those are kind of how the numbers end up working out. We've gotten better at this over time. I'm not gonna say there hasn't been progress. There has. They're certainly better now than they ever have been. But they were really wildly wrong initially. And at the same time, faction terrain is just like, oh cool, this extra thing I get to paint and bring with me. I have an allegiance ability that is stuck to a thing on the board as opposed to just being a rule. Right? Hate it. I don't want it. There you go.
Ones that really annoy me are the ones where the faction terrain doesn't really do much of anything, but you still have to. That's where like the feculent Gnarlmaw is sitting right now. It like, why am I even bothering to bring this?
Yeah.
Like, just give me the contagion point every turn. Like,
yep.
Why? Like, oh wait, hold on. I've got a battle tactic that I can, if I have a guy within, like an enemy within 12 inches of it, I score a battle tactic if I don't have an enemy within 12 inches of it at the end of
Right.
the turn. So now I have to try and put it in a place where the enemy might be within 12 inches of it so I
Sure.
can maybe score a battle tactic. It's like, oh my God, I hate this.
Yes. I love what Justin Sloan just said, and or Corbin is in the same place. It's an allegiance ability that costs money. Yes. That is the best summation. Corbin, you were making the same point, so I absolutely agree with you too. But like what a concise, perfect, like just damning verdict on faction terrain, right? It is an allegiance ability that costs money. Terrible. Okay.
I think in concept, they're cool. I think if they could have done them better, it could be cool. Like for certain ones, like the Sylvaneth Woods are a cool concept. Although, as you have beat the drum about for a long time, just make that terrain over there is overgrown
Yeah.
instead.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. Um, I think for Nurgle, like the Gnarl Maws, I do actually like, but again, that terrain over there is corrupted.
Right.
Like that would work.
Yep.
Um,
If a Nurgle unit moves on two, ends their move, blah blah blah, and does this thing, then the terrain counts as corrupted. Blah, 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 blah. Right? That would be what it is. You can start with
yep.
one piece of corrupted terrain in your own territory, something like that. Yeah, yeah. You could have the same allegiance ability. It could still even be terrain related. You just don't pay money for it. And I would love the concept of army specific terrain, just not part of your army. Just like you want to make a cool table that's like an orc table. Here's some Iron Jaws settlements or terrain box, right? Or here's a like basically that's what we got with the whatever it was with the Stormcast cities or the Dawnbringer Crusade building pieces, right? It was just like this is them building a city. It's city's terrain, right? You could do the same thing with other armies. It doesn't need to be part of your force org chart or your list. It could just be a cool way to you want to theme a terrain board like that. Neat. So
and now I just hope we're not getting a new cycle of
that the Maw Pit is going to herald a new cycle of terrain.
yeah, you either get your pot of gumbo or your toothy butthole. Like pick one.
Yes.
I like pick one. I don't do this to us guys.
Yeah.
Don't make this every me.
Yep. Another thing from this time period that I think we've that I don't want to breeze over is there's still one army. FEC right now still uses these sub factions. Let's not forget, but they're the last one.
Mm-hmm.
As of this Saturday, they're the last one. Sub faction design was way too heavy. There was just too much going on.
Wait.
It was like you do this thing and you get a rule and you get a command ability and you have to take this artifact and you have to take this command trait. It just like it invalidated so much stuff in your book, right?
Yeah.
It was really annoying. I just didn't like most of the sub faction design. I'm not sure we're in the right place now. Now maybe we're too light. Like maybe the pendulum swung too far the other way. But regardless of that, I don't know what the sweet spot is. But what I'll say for sure is that it was way too heavy in 2.0. That is for sure.
There were a whole bunch of books that nobody ever looked at the command trait table in that book because all of the sub factions told you what your command trait had to be, and you had to get the command trait table. You had to give up having a sub faction. Nobody was going to do that.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, and it's just like complete nonsense. So yeah, agreed. Battalions were also way too important in this time period, right? Let us not forget, Paul, that this was like the height of ridiculous battalions. Okay.
Yeah.
We didn't have Vanguard Wing Prop anymore, but it was crazy.
Yeah. It was one drop. It gave you a command point. It gave you an extra artifact.
Yep.
It cost you points, but they also weren't that expensive.
Right. Like comparatively, you were just doing like so much. Like you buy a command point for 50 points, You take the battalion. Right now, the nice part about it was, I will say, the thing I did, like one of the side benefits of having battalions cost points is it reduced the amount of models in your army. I know I'm banging on about this drum, right, of like less models in armies. But when we flipped to 3.0, they were like, battalions are free now, but they're these core battalions. But we're upping the points on everything, right? To compensate for that. So armies remain about the same size. That has completely eroded over time as just like everything has kept forcing points down and down and down, right? We're just back into a worse situation than we've ever been for the size of these armies and the amount of time it takes to resolve a game. But yes, the battalions gave you so much. And like, again, some armies had absolutely amazing battalions. Some armies' battalions were garbage, right? And that was just, they were so big in what they did. Yep.
Books battalions were the make or break a lot of times.
Yep. Absolutely. Let us not forget this, Paul. You made mention of it earlier. I want to give you a moment to opine on this one. But the constantly changing options, and here I'm thinking of like malign sorcery artifacts and realm artifacts and all of that stuff, right? Yeah, where it's like, oh, you can take a cloak that can make you fly. Nope, you can't do that anymore. Now you take a different thing and it makes you do this other thing. And those are gone too now. It's just like, it's constant. Throughout 2.0, we just could not find the system that we liked, right?
Yeah, and the malign sorcery artifacts. There were artifacts for 7 of the 8 realms. Never take Azir, right?
Right.
There was 2 tables of 6 for each,
Yep.
right? There was like a table of weapons and a table of items for each one.
That's right.
So 12 times 7 is what? 84?
Yes.
84 artifacts. 84 generic artifacts that any hero in the entire game could take.
Right.
And you know what? 80 of them were trashed.
That's a bit strong. I remember we did a show on this and I said that 8 of them were worth taking. So, but you're not that far off. I mean, I agree with you. Effectively, what we're talking about here is like 10% or less. Right? We're not garbage.
Yeah. And some of them were cool. I mean, I wish some of them kind of stuck around.
Sure.
Like Sword of Judgment was like, I don't know. Like you at least did fun stuff with that. I don't know that ever was like game breaking, but it was fun.
No, that's just it. There was like the you can fly now. I had a steam tank commander and I modeled a flying steam tank. The number of times I modeled things with artifacts on them that would then go away is shocking. Mm-hmm. Okay. But like you could take the thing that made you fly. You could take the 4-up ward against mortal wounds. You know, there were like some really weird and interesting choices in there. Like I said, there were probably about 8, 9 maybe that were like you could see in some lists, right? But most of them were just terrible. Yeah. Just terrible.
Yep. We had that like one GHB where we had like a secondary mystical terrain or mysterious terrain.
Yes, the secondary mystical terrain table. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, like at the start of the game, you roll the die to see which terrain table you're going to use. What?
Right.
Like, and it then suffered from the same problem that the one we have now does. Like the original one had. That there's like 2 things on it that matter, and everything else is like it might as well just not do anything.
Sure.
And I don't know from like a game design perspective if you really want to have like 6 different things that are all impactful on the game that every single terrain piece on the board could be. Like, I don't know if that is actually a good idea or not. But it certainly feels bad to just like roll out the terrain dice and just have it be like, oh, that's not arcane or mystical or whatever, then oh, okay, then I don't care. Like it's the one that gives me +1 bravery. Pass. Don't even bother marking it.
Right. Right.
Like, um, we had a couple of different iterations of what the realm rules were, and one of them piggybacked off of the terrain rules as well. Like all of like if you're in the realm of fire, then all of the terrain pieces on the board are volcanic in
Yep.
addition to
Yep.
everything else, which, by the way, volcanic was on the secondary table, which is
Was.
probably one of the more interesting things that were on either of those tables.
Yeah,
Um,
I really wish when they had went back down to one table, they had harvested the good ones from table 1 and the good ones from table 2, because we would have actually had a list of basically 6 interesting options. Instead, we just
yes.
jettisoned the secondary list and pretended like it never existed. But yes.
Yeah. Like I think volcanic was like a legitimately interesting
Yeah, it's cool.
like terrain to have.
Yeah, yeah.
Like yeah, you roll a die. If it's a 6, it blows up. Like okay, like it does something. um, it's not going to do something every turn. It it's not going to be game breaking, but it does something.
Yep.
Um, yeah. Oh man, it was just so much stuff. Um, and in this period of time, you had to decide what realm your army list was from.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
And then that would then link back to the realm artifacts in which realm artifacts you were allowed to take. So you couldn't mix and match from two different realms.
Yep.
If you were going to take, you know, Akshi artifacts, you could only take your book artifacts and the Akshi artifact. You couldn't take the Gur artifact too.
Yes. Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Absolutely. I love how that's still hanging out on War Scroll Builder, and people who've come into the game recently must be like, "What does this even mean?" It's still there. What do you mean? What realm am I from? Who knows? What is that? What does this do? Why is this here?
Yeah.
I love that we can still see those little echoes of former these constant changes throughout second hours. We were just like throwing crazy crap at the wall to see what would stick. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Mm.
And then finally, my last, the bad, was Broken Realms, which is also in the good, because Broken Realms also had a lot of silly crap in it that just like rules wise was mechanically insane. So it's kind of a mixed bag, is my point.
Yeah, I mean, Broken Realms got Cities of Sigmar up to 11 subfactions, I think.
Right.
Which, I mean, the new book also has 11, but they are very, very light.
Right.
This was 11 subfactions that all had like their own spell lores and artifacts and
Right.
command traits.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. All right. So that brings us to basically July 2021, Paul. I don't know if you realize what that means, but that means we are officially in the pandemic, right? This is like that's
Yeah.
that's what has happened here. We've transitioned into that time period, and now it's time to transition into AoS 3.0, the thing we currently find ourselves in the as we're staring down within a week probably the announcement and explanation of the very last army book for this edition, just in time to be 6 months away from the end of the edition.
Yeah.
Uh, version 3.0, so July 2021 launch box through present. My good. Very cleanly formatted, like our numbered rules, very cleanly explained. Everything has become they got this like section 28.1.2, whatever type of framing. Though far
Yeah.
from watertight rules. Oh, Jess. I don't know if a marketing person made you say that, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to ever say such a silly thing. Um, but they were cleanly formatted. I'll give it that. Uh, I think we're in a world where we've had some of the best design scenarios. We've seen a lot more balance in these things. Things are pretty tight. You don't see runaway scores. You don't know you've lost like a 2 when your opponents are like, well, I scored 28. What? I'm at 2. Like that doesn't happen anymore. You've got a lot of improved quality of life items over the course of 3.0, right? Pile in cleanups and how it works. Look out, sir. Just a lot of little things like this, right?
Yeah.
Improved reach on most units so that you can deal with that. The coherency change we finally got that was good. Like it took them most of the edition, but we did eventually get there to moving it to 6 models. Should be 11, but 6 is better than 5. We've had much tighter balance. Like we've brought in, remember when we started, Tom and I were complaining about the fat middle. We wanted to get to 40 to 60. That was the goal. We were way outside of that. Now we're back to the real balance, which is 45 to 55. Right?
Yeah.
And most of our factions are falling in that space. And even the ones who don't, you still see them like 4-1 and 5-0 tournaments. Like it can be done by a good player. And we get regular updates, right? Every 3 months, we get the battle scroll, we get updates to armies, points changes, so on and so forth, right? And then we removed a lot of the time sync items because we mentioned it. 2.0 was the height of rerolls, just reroll madness. Everybody rerolls all the time, constantly. You're rerolling everything. Reroll hits, reroll wounds, reroll saves, reroll ward rolls. Why not? Just do it all, right? We also cut a lot of the weight of dice, spam attacks, that kind of thing where it's like, I make 160 crappy bow shots and I fire twice. It's like, oh God. And I have rerolls. Oh God. Tell me when you're done with your shooting phase. I'm going to go get a sandwich and eat that sandwich and then go to the restroom and then go to Jamaica and then fly back and you'll be done with your shooting phase. Like insanity. All right. So I think those are all good things. What do you, where are you living? On the good side.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think they brought a lot of things in a lot tighter in terms of how they're writing it. Like I remember one of the first FAQs that I had to send into Games Workshop in the early days of Age of Sigmar was the pregame movability.
Yep.
There were I remember there were 4 different war scrolls at launch that had abilities like that. And 2 of them said before the game starts, you can make a move. And the other 2 said you can move and run.
Right.
And I was like, wait, when you move, you can run. So does that mean that one can run but the other can't? And so, wait, no, it didn't say move and run. It said move but not run.
There you go. Yes.
That's what it was. It was like, why would I be able to run?
Right.
They've cleaned up those things. Like they learned how to copy paste
Right.
rules so that it's consistent.
Fun fact, 3.0 is when they created their rules Bible, where they are actually copy pasting now for the books. They did not do that before this edition.
Which that just the fact that it took that long just hurts. Like I feel physical pain thinking about that. But
sure.
I can we just also, I know we're still trying to be in the good at the moment, but
we can transition into bad. It's okay. Let's do it.
We can give Games Workshop a lot of praise for what they have tightened up over time.
Sure.
the things that the errors that escape into final product, into customers' hands, in my opinion anyway, is completely unacceptable. Their quality assurance in their product, in their rules writing, is atrocious. It's so bad. It's like they don't have a second person even read anything on
Do
some
you
of
mean
these.
like editing, or do you like are you talking about like grammatical and spelling errors and that kind of thing, or are you talking about like the rules writing and loopholes? Like which one?
Uh, the like the rules writing and loopholes.
Okay, as you say, I think they actually have
Like,
really good editors for the most part. Like they'll occasionally have some of those kinds of problems, but they like their actual like book editors. I think are actually really good. Like I'm not trying to be facetious or funny
right.
because like that is a very difficult job to be an editor on a book like this, and I think they've generally done a really good job. So I do want to credit those. Those are like invisible heroes. Um,
Yeah,
so
I think that's a different group of people, I think, entirely than what I'm
100%.
I'm saying, you know, how do you let things out the door that you know have to have errata right away?
Sure. Sure.
That's like I I don't again, I, I don't mean to sound like I'm beating them up too badly about this, but like what's this company's revenue? Hundreds of millions of dollars a year,
Well, they're
right?
like a $4 billion market cap, I believe, something like that. 4 or 5.
Yeah, they're publicly traded, billions of dollars in market capitalization.
Yep.
There is no effing excuse for them to let some of these errors out the door the way they do. They just don't. I maybe it's my own professional experience. Like I work in accounting where errors going out the door are basically unacceptable.
Sure.
Um, so I look at this and I'm like, man, somebody's gonna get fired. And then nobody does. And then it happens again. And it's the same person letting it out the door again and not getting fired. And it's like
I get you.
it's
I have always and firmly placed this at the feet of not having a formal game developer position. You have game designers, you don't have somebody whose only job is to be a game developer. Now, my understanding is recently this year they have actually filled that role and do have a formal game developer now. But obviously, we won't see the fruits of that labor until probably 4.0, realistically, right? I mean, if you think about how
yeah,
far ahead they work. But I am happy to see that move because, like, it was needed. And I think that they are undergoing a change. You know, like I think a lot of the the nature of the studio is such that it has changed hands, as it were, over the 3.0. And I do
not
think when you
really.
you look at the trajectory, having a formal developer position, the you look at Matt Rose bringing like doing Battle Scroll and the Meta Watch and being very data driven and stuff like that. I think I do see a lot of positive change there, and I do want to give him credit for that. I mean,
Yeah,
that's not to excuse what you're talking about, right?
right.
And so, no, Kyle, the Canadian dude is Matt Rose. He was a and
Yes.
who is a very 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 smart, very capable, excellent guy. Like we are very lucky to have Matt having come from like who comes from video games, having decided to upend his entire life and move from Canada to Nottingham, England, to go do this job because I do think he's been an incredible boon to the game. Um,
Absolutely. And I have to say, 100% every single thing I have seen come out of him,
right.
I have been totally impressed with.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He is everything I have seen, he's been a tremendous asset to make the company better, make the game better. Everything like top notch. Love it. Please more of that direction. Games Workshop, holy crap, listen to what this guy tells you to do.
Right.
Do
Yep.
it.
Yep. But when I think about the current bad, like I think that I see the trajectory that pulls us out of what you're talking about. Hopefully, like
Hmm.
I've seen improvement, and I hope we continue to see that. Like the trend line is going the right direction, is what I would say. Right.
Yes.
To me, 3.0's biggest problems are, and we've talked about it 100 times in the show, but I'm going to keep mentioning it: the high complexity through the introduction of like battle tactics and a ton of other interactions and game artifacts that make the game very complex to play, and the complete lack of an on ramp for new players. I think you've not seen like over 3.0. I don't think we've seen the growth that we did. And I mean, of course, that's going to happen to some degree. Tournaments are still growing. I think some people are finally getting out to tournaments that haven't gone before, and that's good. So it's not as though the scene isn't there. But I know that like we're bleeding people out we don't need to, and we're missing conversion opportunities that we could have otherwise had as a community because of the complexity and the lack of an on ramp, right? I just think, and those are two very easy problems. Well, I shouldn't say it. The on ramp problem is actually very easy. That is like that's very easy to solve. And by the way, putting out a white dwarf with some weird alternate rules in it is not the way to solve it. Um, Making it part of your core game where you have a combat patrol equivalent that says go buy this box, paint this box, and here is a simple battle pack to play this box against your friends in a relatively balanced way is the way to fix this. We saw it happen in 40K. I hope it happens in an even cleaner version in AoS, right?
Mhm.
That is the correct way. This is the way. Okay. The
I think
complexity
we're
thing
really
is more challenging because like we've written ourselves into this corner for some degree. And so like it's there is where the pruning we talked about comes in. Like 4.0 is going to have to make some decisions. And either that means you have a low complexity battle pack and a high complexity battle pack, which that's an option. You don't have to prune the whole game. You could just have different settings. You could go that direction, right? Or it means you got
Mhm.
to get into them core rules and start cutting. One of the two.
Yeah. I'm wondering, you know, circling this back all the way back to the beginning of this evening, I wonder if we're going to get a differentiation with the release of Old World, where Old World becomes the high complexity game and Age of Sigmar becomes the lower complexity game.
I would be fine with it. It's great.
I would
Good.
too.
I mean,
Yeah.
80% of the market wants a simpler, lower complexity experience. So
Yeah.
I mean, like if I was the business person, I'd want to sell to 80% of the market, not 20% or whatever, right? But what do I know? So
Yeah. I think any changes they make to rules at this point, they really need to look at it and say, is this increasing complexity or is this decreasing complexity?
sure.
If it's increasing complexity, they really, really need to justify it and say, like, what value is this increase in complexity adding to the game? And is the increase in value justified for the increase in complexity?
Yep. Absolutely agreed. Absolutely agreed. I think you have to be constantly evaluating that, right? Every time you write a rule, you got to be like, is this worth it? Is this worth it? You got to put it on the scales, right? 100%. It's the whole weight of a feather test for your soul or whatever, right? Um, Absolutely. So I also want to call out the enhancement section of the core rules, a legendarily terrible uh, section of rules writing that is impenetrable to a new person. Like it is just unbelievable how bad that section is. As I've said many times, the core rules of 3.0 are 27 sections of, or 26 sections or whatever it is, of like pretty easily understandable, grokkable, pretty well written rules. And then one section of nonsense. Just nonsense. I mean, like, getting into AOS 3.0, right? Like, I had obviously come from playing AOS since the beginning, since launch. And I read this and I had to read it like 4 times. I was like, what is this telling me to do? I do not get this. It is so wild
It,
how terrible it is.
it took me a long time. It took me probably like 2 years almost to realize that when you added a spell enhancement, it gave you an extra spell slot on all of your wizards, not just one.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Like, like it. Why does that one thing have this weird exception?
Right.
Like,
If you take that, or
like
same for clerics. Whereas if you take artifact, it's not like everybody gets an artifact, right? No, it's just like, yeah, these weird distinctions and how they work. They all get lumped together. There's like now a bunch of unique ones. We still got triumphs floating around for no reason, and like you can take an extra triumph. Okay, sure. Like I'm not saying no one's ever done that. Sure, there's like 0.1% of lists where that's the correct choice. That doesn't need to exist, right? That kind of stuff. Um, in 3.0, over the course of this, we've still seen the case, even now, where some battle tomes have been given far more love than others, right?
way more.
I look at, um, I look at the Skaven book being my classic go-to example. I love the book. I like how it opened up list building. I still think it's one of the most fun armies to list build with, and I'm not really a Johnny, but like it activates whatever minor part of me is a Johnny in the sort of list building way. In that I've played that army. Paul, I can't explain to you how many games I've played with Skaven since that book came out, and I've never run the same list twice. Right? It's wild. There's so many different lists to build, but boy, is it not on the level with everything else, right? And that, by the way, I'm picking on that one because that's what I'm most familiar with. But we could pick others that are swinging over there. We're getting better, but you feel the inequity in the battle tactics that are on offer and had to be corrected in Battle Scroll, or the points that were there at the beginning and had to be like knocked way down or brought way up, or Soul Blight Gravelords, just period, right? And then finally, my last bad one, and I'm curious. Let's get your take on this one. And I think we can probably call it a night here. We've been going a while. Swingy GHB seasons. Like we went to 6-month season and year season, but not just that. But each season has been like so radically different. Like boy, do we upend everything. Monsters are amazing and ruling the game. We've got to rein them all in, and then they're doing nothing, and then just like and then every time we want to do it's like, oh, the monster season, but it's actually not. It's bad for monsters or whatever, right? It always ends up being the opposite of whatever's intended. It's just like the seasons just haven't worked out to my estimation as well as they could have. What's your take?
I, I think they I think they just need to reel it back. Like it like they tried something. First of all, let me even just take a step back from this. Um, why are we even still in Gur? Why have we
Sure.
spent 3 years in Gur? I do not understand the story reason that we have had 4 generals handbooks in Gur.
Yep.
Is there a story reason for this?
I mean, none of the current action in I don't have the Broken Realms book sitting behind me anymore. I just have this wonderful copy of Majestic 13 available now. You can find the link below.
Ooh.
As well as, like I said, don't forget, watch this space because coming this Friday, Adam and I are releasing something new. At any rate, um, I don't know, man. I don't know. Literally, there's nothing narratively interesting happening in Gur. Gairan and Akshi and arguably Gairan, Akshi, and uh, uh, Shadow Realm and maybe Shaiish are where most of the action is focused. I mean, I guess what's going on in Gur is whatever's happening in Warcry. A spaceship crashed, and we got to go get to the heart of it. I guess that's happening. So we got like meat trees and Warcry releases for a year and a half.
Yeah, I don't I don't understand. It feels like we got stuck narratively in this one location. The actual narrative didn't stay there, and we didn't really get a good explanation of why the General's Handbook narrative stayed there.
Mm-hmm.
I,
When like
I don't
all the
know.
rest of the world seems to be moving on, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Now I want
they
to.
could have done this in so many like they could have stuck with this like themed battle pack idea and
Sure.
done it in so many better ways. Like instead of like we're gonna go to like different regions of Gur, why couldn't we have just had we're gonna have a Gur battle pack? Okay,
Sure.
cool. We did Gur. Now we're gonna shift. We're gonna go to Akshi now.
Yeah. Sure.
Now we're just gonna have fire battle pack fire.
Yeah,
Like
that would mean you'd end up visiting the same realm once every 7, 8 years. That doesn't feel too often. That really
no.
doesn't. As it is
And
now, we'll come back to Gur in like 2057.
yeah, and it's I don't know. You could have a more subtle thing about like magic or monsters
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever else in there. It just make it more about the realm that you're in or whatever overarching narrative thing is going on rather than unit type flavor of the month.
Yep. And like I agree, CW Craner made a point about how like a year of bounty hunters would have been more damaging, right? But I do want 1 year seasons. But you're right about bounty hunters being terrible. It was an awful dark time, and that's part of what I mean under swingy GHB seasons, right? We got bounty hunters and stuff like that. It's just nonsense. Um, the horde season, it wasn't about that at all. It was the opposite of that because you just get obliterated by bounty hunters. But that's what I'm saying. These GHBs shouldn't be having rules that are that strong, that heavy, that swingy, doing that much. Like in the GHB, first of all, I mentioned GHB 2017 being the best. I stand behind that now in 3.0. And I look at our current GHBs, and although printed wise, the book is higher quality than it's ever been, like the actual physical thing is beautiful and extremely well made. I look at it and it feels anemic compared to what those were. Because what we could have, let's like Paul to take your example, because I agree with you completely, is you go for a realm, you tell a story in that realm, you've got a narrative section with some pretty heavy, crazy rules that does wild, wacky stuff for people who want to deeply engage and have an experience that they don't expect to be necessarily balanced in the same way that's going to have swingy, wild effects, because you're telling a narrative story of what goes on in that realm. You have some multiplayer stuff in there, or team stuff in there, or Triumph and Treachery stuff in there, or all of the above. And then you have your new event battle pack that speaks to that realm we're in and adds some minor tweaks and touches to make people feel that change. Not game busting battalions and spells and like magic is totally different now. We use extra dice. Like none of that. Like it's fine. And then just have 12 good scenarios. Most Warhammer players probably play 3 or less games a year. Okay? Like, that's reality. So, they don't need super heavy, crazy changes. Now, tournament players who are doing 5 games on a weekend and doing 2 tournaments a month, sure, they might get to know the meta and it might be unlocked. I would still argue it's going to be a highly changing environment because of new battle tomes coming out and battle scroll and stuff like that. Like there's still plenty of churn happening to keep it interesting. But you could always just at the 6 month mark publish 6 new scenarios for your event battle pack as a PDF.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that'll change up the tournament experience for the back half of the year. Right? We don't need this. This is my problem. I just feel like the GHB is like, despite having, and I stand behind this, I think the current GHB, the one right now, has some of the best designed scenarios I've ever played. I think generally they are, most of them, like 9.5 of them, are tournament ready and fun, and I enjoy playing them. And I only think one of them is utter trash. And that's the Two Towers one. That's just terrible. And that's great. Like, that's really good and should be heralded. But why is that all we're doing with this book? Right? So I just
The initial General's Handbook concept was a home run. I don't know why they did
right,
this.
right. By the way, the General's Handbook, you know what that's built off of, right? That's built off of the General's Compendium, which is a thing that was existed in Warhammer Fantasy Battles, which had a bunch of different play types and supported a bunch of different ways to explore the game, and here's a map campaign section of rules and so on and so forth, right? Where's that stuff? It just feels like, especially since we got rid of points out of there, because obviously they're in the they're free now, which is great, good. That's all the points updates are separate and digital and stuff like that. Yeah. Um, but like
And
put
what
other
about Season
stuff in
of
there.
War?
What's that?
Remember Season of War Thondia? That we just had this like one random narrative supplement that had like all of the other stuff in it that should have been in the General's Handbook. And it was like, oh, maybe we're just gonna get one of these every year instead. But then we just got one for the entire edition, and they dropped it.
Right. Right.
It was a great book, by the way.
It was a
Big
very
fan.
fun book. We played through the whole narrative arc in there, Buddy and I. Had a fun time. It was great. Like we did it as a chained thing week to week, right? Like actually following the little track. It was fun. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. You want my guess, Paul? You want my guess? Thondi is what gave us the original Incarnate. The Incarnate was received so poorly they iced it. Whatever the next season was supposed to be. So, which if that's the case, correct choice.
Yeah. So we've talked about pruning things.
Yep.
What things? Let's say three things.
Yep.
What three things would you prune out of the current Age of Sigmar rules for a new edition?
Incarnates are gone. That's instantaneous. That's I'm not even gonna count that. That's not one of my three. I'm just putting them in the bin. Okay. Like they're dead now. That whole concept is dead now. Bye. Bye bye. Go away. Leave. Okay. If I can't answer 3-year seasons, right? Because that's what I would like to do. You're asking me like real rules that I would cut out. If I have to do this as one thing and not a not a new battle pack, it's easier if you ask me like what's my starter battle pack, because then I would just say I would cut battle tactics, I would cut battalions, and I would cut uh, probably what's the third thing I'd cut? I don't know. I'd have to think about the third one. But those two would be easy cuts for a starter battle pack. Either get rid of battle tactics or grand strategies or something, or do something different with them. I don't like the way those two interact. I think they're silly. I don't like the army specific core battalions. I think they're garbo. I would definitely prune army specific battle tactics and grand strats at minimum. Those are gone. Those are just yeeted into the sun instantaneously. Those have no reason for existing. So that would stuff like that would make my list. I would obviously completely redesign the enhancement section a lot. Like that would be ground up rewrite, right? I would redesign the core battalions because one of them is really good, two of them are pretty decent, and three of them are utter trash.
Yeah.
Those need a second pass. Like we clearly got the first pass at those, right?
Yeah.
So I'm hoping they learn from it and we get a better version now this time around. So that kind of stuff. I think that would be. I mean, there's probably other stuff we could prune. Um, like we could probably clean up some things here and there. I'd have to like really flip through and think like what's the right answer, but I'm sure that at least that. A lot of the
Yeah.
ancillary stuff. We've cut a lot of good stuff. Like the stacking is gone, the re-rolling is gone, the multiple word saves and stuff is gone. Like all that stuff has been handled, right? So
Yeah. I really want them to relook at the like force organization.
mm,
Um,
good call. Good call.
um, we're at a place where point structures have made it where you know, let's just assume 2,000 point game or these. How often are you ever going to be able to reasonably fit more than 6 heroes into a list.
It's almost always a bad
Um,
choice. Like it's almost always going to ruin your army. And the armies that want more than
yeah,
6 heroes, they purposely de-leaderified the other heroes, like Grimwrath Berserkers and stuff like that.
right. How many artillery pieces even exist in the game at all anymore?
Exactly.
Almost none. And like 3/4 of them are Skaven. So are we punishing one army? This is
Yes.
stupid.
Yes.
Um, I like why like behemoths. Like, why is that restriction there? Because anytime you have an army that would bump up against that restriction, it has an exception where you just blow over it.
Yep.
So it's a meaningless restriction. And then battle line, like, there's very few armies, it feels like battle line actually is a real constraint. Um, so many conditional battle line out there, so many things are battle line. Hitting 3 battle line units is not hard. So I I I don't know what the correct answer for forced organization is. Um, Also with like why are we still restricting max 3 endless spells?
Sure.
Why does that restriction even need to
Well,
be
because of the
there?
time when they were like because of one go round where they were overcooked, and people would spam them out there, and they blocked movement and stuff like that, right? Like this is what happens.
Yeah. And now it is a meaningless artifact in the rules. It's just bloat now.
Yep.
Uh, and the ally rules and coalition. Why do we have allies and coalition without like a really meaningful distinction between what those two things are? Um, I don't know. I think they need to relook at that too. A lot of it. I think there's a lot of room there. I don't know what the correct answer is for what it should be, but I know that what we have now is dumb and doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, I mean, at minimum, the artillery one is a joke, and obviously we know that reinforcement points are just obscenely punishing to some armies for no reason other than how they decided to write the numbers in the back of the book, right? It's not that kind of thing.
You're punishing certain armies for absolutely no reason, and then every other army it doesn't matter at all to. So, what is the purpose of having that rule in there at all?
Right,
Like,
right.
what problem is it solving?
Yep, agreed. All right, well, that brings us to what did we miss, everybody? Hey, you should tell us in the comments below. Drop us down. Paul, thank you, man. Really appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks for having me once again. It's been fun.
Always a pleasure, my man. Always a pleasure. For all of you out there, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for watching and all the great commentary and chat this whole time. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, do all those things. Watch this space this Friday. Announcement from Uncle Adam and I. You can also check out Tabletop Minions channel. He'll have stuff too for what we're doing, our newest release. So look forward to that. As I said, it'll be this Friday. We just wanted to say thanks for supporting our games. And if you want to support the channel, there's lots of ways you can do this. You can share this with people. That's free. There's some Amazon links down below. If you're going to buy something, any of your hobby products, you can click those. That doesn't cost you anything extra, but it kicks a little money back to the channel. There's links for things like Monument Hobbies and Element Games and stuff like that. So again, no extra money. In fact, sometimes you might save money because there's discount codes down there. So if you're going to buy some Pro Acryl paints, maybe maybe my signature line of paints, hey, you can actually save money on them. So check all that stuff out. But if you do want to spend some money, you can do so through our merch store or through the Patreon, which helps keep the lights on around here. But really, it's focused on review and feedback and helping you take your next step on your hobby journey. So thank you for all of our wonderful Patreon supporters. I really, 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 really appreciate it. And all of you who are watching, thank you so much. So with that, I will say thank you very much. Paul, pleasure as always. All of you, we'll see you next Wednesday.